Chapter 317. Don't be nervous, my friend. We won't harm our friends because we have faith. As for how I know that you are the original owner of this armor, first of all, you were too obvious at the auction house. Second, my family also has shares in Philips. Although I can't clearly know the name of the owner of the armor, I can still know the news of a Wuxia. Today, you are the only Wuxia present. Seeing that Jiang Hai was a little nervous, Du Feimin shrugged indifferently and said to Jiang Hai with a smile. Although Jiang Hai knew that Du Feimin was telling the truth, Jiang Hai still had to be careful. This guy was not as polite as he looked on the surface. In that case, he should have already known that Jiang Hai was the owner of the armor before the auction started. The reason why he came over to get acquainted with Jiang Hai was probably to get close to him. As for the person in charge, it was very likely that this guy had hired him. It seemed that Jiang Hai was still too young. I just went to deal with the handover of the armor. Your armor has already boarded the plane and is flying to my residence in Dubai. As for your money, Philips is currently transferring it to you. Not a single cent less. As if he saw Jiang Hai's grudge, Du Feimin said with a smile. He had already known about this. I don't care about the armor. I only care about the money. Seeing Du Feimin sitting directly in front of him, Jiang Hai also slowly sat down. While eating the German roast pork in front of him, he also said with a smile. That's right, my friend. Don't have any psychological burden. What I gave you is real money. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Feimin couldn't help but laugh. What he said was very true. In that case, my friend, now that the transaction is over, what are you looking for me for? Putting down the knife and fork in his hand, Jiang Hai looked at Du Feimin and asked curiously. It's like this, Jiang. I think you also know that our Dubai has recently been undergoing a tourism renovation. I wonder if you are interested in joining us. As my friend, I'll give you the green light all the way. Seeing Jiang Hai's serious appearance, Du Feimin also smiled. Jiang Hai took 1 billion from him, so he naturally wanted to fight for it. This wasn't just 11 pieces. Oh, Du Feimin, you're not treating me as a friend. Is Dubai's real estate business really that good now? Looking at Du Feimin, Jiang Hai shook his head and directly rejected his proposal. What a joke, who didn't know? Ever since Dubai's oil wells were about to dry up, the Dubai government decided to turn Dubai into a tourist city. From then on, they built a large number of entertainment facilities and offered cheap land prices to attract foreign real estate developers. But these things were all bubbles. Jiang Hai remembered that a few years ago, Dubai almost went bankrupt because of tourism. At its peak, Dubai owed the outside world more than $30 billion. Fortunately, the Arabian royal families were basically in cahoots with each other. Other countries in the world poured a lot of money into Dubai, which was how Dubai came back from the dead. But even so, there were a lot of unfinished buildings in Dubai. Many people were willing to travel here, but no one was willing to live here. At least, almost no rich people in Wuxia would move there. The cost of living was too high, and it was located in the middle of the desert. Plus, the security wasn't very good. After all, the world of ordinary people was very poor. So many people were willing to travel, but they weren't willing to live there. Jiang Hai would be crazy to develop there. Oh, it seems that my friend is very smart. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Feimin didn't care. He knew that as long as this person wasn't stupid, he wouldn't agree to come to Dubai to do real estate business. You're not interested in real estate. Then, are you interested in this? After Du Feimin finished speaking, he took out a piece of hard paper from the sleeve of his robe and handed it to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai took it and looked at it. His eyes lit up. If he wasn't interested in real estate, he was very interested in this thing. Can you tell me why you're selling this to me? Jiang Hai asked curiously as he tapped on the hard paper in front of him. He really didn't understand. One had to know that there were people dying every day in the world for this thing. Although this thing wasn't much, it was the lifeline of the world. Jiang Hai didn't believe that a pie would fall from the sky. Of course, I believe that you won't easily sell this thing to others. This is also a kind of investment. I'll leave it with you first. When the time comes, I'll redeem it. Of course, if you want to sell it, it's up to you. After all, this thing is yours, Du Feimin said seriously as he looked at Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai gently tapped on the hard paper in front of him. Now, he was considering whether this business was good or not. After hesitating for about 5 minutes, Jiang Hai smiled. He felt that he was thinking too much. No matter what Du Feimin wanted the money for, he did get what he wanted. Most importantly, this thing would never depreciate. Even when he got these things, the value of these things was already rising. Jiang Hai didn't know that Du Feimin's things should be able to sell at a higher price. Why did he let him take advantage of this? But looking at his smile and his eyes looking at the Soviet Russians in the distance from time to time, Jiang Hai understood that by selling his resources to the enemy, he could indeed obtain higher profits in a short time. But in the future, this would be the trump card in the hands of his enemy. And Jiang Hai, an outsider, would be a good place to deal with it. Deal. Thinking about the value of this thing, Jiang Hai didn't need to refuse. He directly extended his hand and said to Du Feimin. Du Feimin also extended his hand with a smile. In fact, his thoughts were similar to Jiang Hai's. In this business, Jiang Hai would make money, and he would make time. After talking to Jiang Hai, Du Feimin left. Jiang Hai also left after eating. But he wasn't in a hurry to return to the hotel. Instead, he went to Philip's auction house, where the person in charge had been waiting for him for a long time. As Jiang Hai's phone rang, $282 million were deposited into his bank account. The $400 million that disappeared were exchanged for the stack of paper in his hand. But Jiang Hai was very optimistic about this stack of paper. Taking these papers, Jiang Hai returned to the hotel. Although he looked calm on the way, he was actually on guard the whole time. What if Du Feimin set up a trap for him and turned around to attack? He was on guard against all the passers-by. What if they tried to rob him? He was on guard against the whole world. In Jiang Hai's eyes, there wasn't a single place in the world that was safe. What he needed to do was return to the hotel as soon as possible. Only then could he feel a little more at ease. Jiang Hai drove all the way to the entrance of the hotel very quickly. Naturally, he asked the doorman to park the car. Jiang Hai quickly walked into the hotel. A big, romantic man was lying on the lawn at the entrance of the hotel. Jiang Hai's heart couldn't help but beat a little faster. It wasn't that Jiang Hai was timid, but that this stack of paper was really too important. Jiang, you're back. When Jiang Hai returned to his room, his clothes were unknowingly soaked. When they saw him come back, Aphrodite and the other girls, who had been watching TV, couldn't help but stand up to welcome Jiang Hai. But even when they stood up, they gave Jiang Hai a fright. Seeing Jiang Hai's actions, the girls couldn't help but stare blankly. Phew, it's fine. It's not aimed at you guys. Wait for me here first. We'll leave tomorrow and return to Boston. Looking at the girls, Jiang Hai smiled and comforted them. He hesitated for a moment, but he still trusted the girls. He walked up to them and rubbed their heads one by one before returning to his room. As soon as he entered his room, Jiang Hai took out the file he had been holding in his clothes. Opening the file and looking at the stack of papers inside, the corners of Jiang Hai's mouth couldn't help but open. From the looks of it, the stack of papers in Jiang Hai's arms was only worth $400 million. $400 million wasn't a small amount, but it wasn't worth it for Jiang Hai to be so nervous. After all, he had nearly $600 million in his bank account. It wasn't that he didn't care about the $400 million, but that the $400 million was actually a protective talisman and choice for Jiang Hai. This stack of papers wasn't just worth $400 million. In fact, it was a pass to a higher level. Even if he didn't want to use it to go to a higher level, he could use it in exchange for more benefits and more money. Even when he encountered a crisis that he couldn't solve himself, such as when his opponent was the American government or some large tycoon, this thing would play a crucial role. 400 million? That was just the starting price. Even if Jiang Hai sold it now, no one would be able to touch it without $500 million. And most importantly, as time went by, the money would increase, and there was no possibility of it going to waste. What could make Jiang Hai so confident? Even if it was the fruit company or Coca-Cola, they wouldn't dare say that their stock prices wouldn't drop at all. But Jiang Hai was confident that this stack of papers would make a profit of $1 million. There was no way the price would drop. Changfu was even much bigger than the fruit company and Coca-Cola. It had zero risk and high returns, because this thing was called oil futures. Chapter 318. Jiang Hai didn't know how he fell asleep that night. When he woke up the next day, he was already preparing to return to Boston. With a stack of papers on him, he really wasn't in the mood to let him play here. After getting out of bed, Jiang Hai told Aphrodite and the other girls that they were going to clean up. Originally, Jiang Hai was reluctant to leave his yacht, which cost him more than $5 million, here, so he planned to drive the yacht along the east coast of the United States all the way back to Boston. He estimated that it would take about a week even if he didn't get off the yacht. But at this time, Jiang Hai was not at ease. The yacht was only worth $5 million. If he handed it over to the towing company, it would arrive in about 10 days. But the stack of paper in his arms was worth 400 million, no, it was worth at least 400 million. He didn't want to lose a watermelon for sesame seeds. This was not what he should do. So early this morning, Jiang Hai decided to fly back directly. The girls had heard Jiang Hai's words last night, so they were almost done packing at night. This morning, they checked their belongings for the last time, took their phones, chargers, and so on, and could leave. Jiang Hai and the others had gained a lot from this trip to Miami. Everyone had gained something. Let's talk about the 10 girls first. After this trip to Miami, the 10 girls could finally speak openly after returning. At the same time, because of the life and death situation, the bond between them and Jiang Hai had become tighter and tighter. They liked Jiang Hai more and more. From worship and gratitude at the beginning, they had gradually turned into dependence. From dislike and dislike, they had gradually moved toward love. Of course, Jiang Hai didn't know this. He understood that the gains of these girls, in addition to being able to speak openly, the most important thing was that they bought a lot of new clothes back home. Although the aunties in Jiang Hai's manor had already begun to accept these girls, they still didn't dare to do so. However, with these women's taste, it was really difficult to buy good-looking clothes. Miami was a model's paradise. Here, you could buy anything you wanted. Jiang Hai gave them pocket money, plus the salary they had saved over the past few months, so they could spend a lot of money here. Although they couldn't afford luxury brands, they bought a lot of small things. When they came, each of the girls had a small backpack, but when they went back, they all brought a suitcase. In addition to the girls, Moses Adams also gained a lot. The most obvious thing was that his income had increased a lot. Maybe it was for hush money, or maybe it was for favors. Since they came to Miami, Jiang Hai had given Moses Adams a total of nearly $2 million. If Moses Adams earned this money step by step, it would take him a few years to earn it back. So in response to Jiang Hai's generosity, Moses Adams also offered his friendship and loyalty. As for the one who gained the most, Jiang Hai thought it was himself. This time in Miami, Jiang Hai's net worth doubled, and he also got a priceless stepping stone to the upper class, 400 million yuan of oil futures. Even if Jiang Hai did not have any ambition for the upper class. This was also a talisman. No matter who he offended, as long as he was not considered a traitor by the American government, this thing in his hand could protect him. It should be known that in the United States, it was not the American government that had the power, but the major consortia. Among all the consortia, the most famous one was naturally Rockefeller. Although the reputation of this consortium was very bad, there was no need to doubt the ability of this oil consortium. So in Jiang Hai's view, he really made a lot of money this time. After packing up, Jiang Hai went downstairs first, mainly because he had to check out and discuss the car. Because Moses Adams was going back to Boston with them today, the car rental company had been informed to come and pick up the car they rented. Because of this, they needed to take the hotel car to the airport, which the hotel had no problem with. Jiang Hai and the others lived in a presidential suite and a suite. It was the hotel's responsibility to take them to the airport. So they immediately contacted a luxury minibus to pick up Jiang Hai and the others to the airport. Jiang Hai and the others were not particularly pretentious. After everything was done, Jiang Hai sat by the window of the hall, waiting for Aphrodite and the others to come down, while waiting for the minibus. At the same time, he looked at Miami outside. Although he had been here for a long time, Jiang Hai really liked the city. Of course, it would be better if there were no gray areas. Miami was a very slow and leisure city. Compared with the fast pace of Boston and New York, Jiang Hai preferred this slow feeling. It was indeed a famous tourist city in the United States. At the same time, Jiang Hai also thought, when I chose the ranch, why didn't I choose here? Maybe the ranch here is not good. But the fishing ground here is very good. You know, this is a tropical place. It is as warm as spring all year round, unlike Winthrop. Although it is not as cold as Ice City in winter, it can still freeze people to death. At least the weather made Jiang Hai like this place, but it was too late to say anything now. For now, Jiang Hai has taken root in Winthrop, and he has no plans to go elsewhere for the time being. Just as Jiang Hai was feeling emotional, he suddenly saw a man lying on the lawn of the hotel at this time, a white man. When Jiang Hai came back last night, he saw him lying there. It seems that he has been lying here all night. When he saw him last night, maybe because it was too dark, and Jiang Hai had a lot of treasures, he didn't dare to look at him carefully. Now that it was daytime, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be surprised when he saw this person, because this person looks a bit familiar. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but walk out of the hotel and come to the lawn outside. When Jiang Hai walked over, the big man seemed to have heard Jiang Hai's footsteps. He opened his eyes and sat up. But as soon as he sat up, he covered his ribs and looked at Jiang Hai vigilantly. After seeing that Jiang Hai didn't seem to be a threat to him, he lay down again, but his eyes didn't close again. It's you are that boxer? Looking at the white man lying down again, Jiang Hai tried to recall who this person was in his mind. It was one of the two boxers that he had hired when he went to the bar. The Muay Thai master was nowhere to be found. This big man was the wrestling master. Jiang Hai had no idea where he was. However, what made Jiang Hai a little surprised was that the income of underground fighting should be very high. Why would he appear here? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the big man just glanced at him and didn't speak, still lying there. Why are you here? It seems that your injuries haven't been cured. Didn't you win? Seeing this person's appearance, Jiang Hai sat beside him with some curiosity. He didn't see clearly just now, but now that he was closer, he noticed the situation of this person's body. The injuries on this person's body had only been treated simply. His face was still blue and purple, and the wound on his head seemed to be rotting and had begun to fester. His ribs were also blue and purple. Needless to say, his broken ribs were not fixed properly. This made Jiang Hai feel a little strange. He had heard that people who fought in underground boxing would get a lot of money if they won. What was this situation? Conrad, I'm hungry. Seeing that Jiang Hai not only didn't leave, but also sat beside him, the white man spoke for the first time. But as soon as he spoke, Jiang Hai frowned. Although this man's eyes were clear, Jiang Hai could tell from his somewhat slurred speech that this person seemed to be sick. Conrad should be his name, and he was hungry. Well, from this sentence, the problem could be seen. Then I'll treat you to a meal. What do you want to eat? steak, or a buffet? Looking at the big man in front of him, Jiang Hai also had some thoughts of hiding. It was fate that they met. The most important thing was that Jiang Hai was in a good mood now, so he was prepared to help him. Hamburger, pizza. But unfortunately, in the face of the temptation of steak, the big man shook his head. He didn't like to eat this thing. Instead, he pointed across the street and continued to speak to Jiang Hai in a staccato voice. Let's go, I'll treat you to a meal. Eating a hamburger? Jiang Hai didn't care about treating him. He waved at him directly, indicating that he should go with him. The big man glanced at Jiang Hai and didn't have too much vigilance. Instead, he stood up while clutching his ribs and followed Jiang Hai to the hamburger shop across the street. Originally, Jiang Hai didn't know much about this guy. Now that he stood up and walked forward, even Jiang Hai couldn't help but exclaim because this guy was taller than he imagined. Jiang Hai was originally 186 meters tall, which wasn't particularly short in Wuxia. But after coming to the United States, this height was basically slightly taller than the average height. But since the tattoo, Jiang Hai's body had undergone a second growth. In fact, now Jiang Hai's height had exceeded 1.9 meters and reached about 1.92 meters. Although he didn't measure it in detail, he was now considered a tall man. However, standing next to this guy, Jiang Hai found that his head only reached his shoulders. And this was because he was injured, so he needed to cover his wound. Otherwise, he would be even taller. This guy was definitely more than 2.1 meters tall. When Jiang Hai was looking at this person had already walked quickly across the street and directly walked into a Burger King. In the United States, Western fast foods such as hamburgers were everywhere. Not only were there many small shops opened by people, there were also many small shops. Kaifeng, which dominated the domestic market, was really not a big brand in the United States. It was understandable. The price of chicken and beef was about the same. What was there to compare? Chapter 319. Therefore, in foreign countries, especially the United States, in Western fast food, except for those who want to lose weight and can't control their appetite, very few people will go to eat kaifeng. McDonald's status in the United States is like Coca-Cola, it is untouchable. However, in addition to McDonald's, there are many other fast food restaurants that are also very good, such as Big John's, which is a chain store that sells pizza. This is much more famous than Pizza Hut and Subway, which specializes in selling sandwiches. The taste is very good. There is also Domino's, which also sells pizza, and Burger King, which Conrad entered, is naturally one of the brands. Jiang Hai has eaten Burger King's hamburgers before. To be honest, in terms of hamburgers, Burger King's hamburgers are 2 streets ahead of McDonald's, not to mention kaifeng. Let's not talk about the taste of the hamburgers, just the ingredients in the hamburgers can never be surpassed by kaifeng. Jiang Hai only likes to eat 2 kinds of hamburgers. One is the Imperial Burger, which is more than 2 circles bigger than an ordinary hamburger, with 2 layers, 3 layers, 4 layers, the thick layers of meat stacked together, with pickled cucumber, lettuce, and sauce on top. The taste is really unparalleled. And it is quite filling. For a big eater like Jiang Hai, he is full after eating 2. In addition to the Imperial Burger, Jiang Hai's favorite is the Italian full meat burger, which has 3 or 4 layers, 1 layer of meat, 1 layer of cheese, 1 layer of meat, 1 layer of cheese, and 1 layer of bacon on top. It is quite delicious to eat. In addition to cheese and meat in the mouth, although the price is slightly more expensive than kaifeng, it is really good food. It seems that Conrad is also quite knowledgeable. He went straight to this burger shop. However, as soon as he entered, 2 waiters walked towards him. Get out, you are not welcome here. Looking at Conrad, the 2 waiters couldn't help but say coldly. Hearing their words, Conrad's footsteps stopped at this time, which made Jiang Hai, who has been following him, also stop and look at Conrad's face. Because he knows that Conrad is not an ordinary person, he is very strong. He is really afraid that these two guys will make him angry. If he goes berserk, then it will be troublesome. However, the berserk that Jiang Hai imagined did not happen. After listening to the words of the two waiters, Conrad's face flashed a trace of frustration, but it quickly disappeared. He turned around and was about to leave. He is really a bit too obedient. Hey, don't leave, I will treat you. Seeing that Conrad was about to leave, Jiang Hai immediately pulled him and said loudly. At this time, after the two waiters heard Jiang Hai's words, they couldn't help but have an awkward look on their faces. But now, they couldn't say anything, so they could only retreat to the side and pretend that nothing happened. Conrad, you are dirty. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Conrad still insisted on leaving, but to his surprise, Jiang Hai's hand grabbed his hand like an iron ring, making him unable to move at all. This was the first time Conrad lost to someone in strength, but he didn't care. Instead, he looked back at Jiang Hai, pointed to himself, and said, "It's okay, come on." Jiang Hai smiled. Isn't a service agency supposed to serve others? Conrad and I are consumers now. Not to mention that Conrad is only a little dirty, and there is no other smell on him except for the smell of blood. Even if a person's body is stained with excrement, this place shouldn't reject others, right? Under Jiang Hai's tugging, Conrad sat at a table for four and looked at the people around him nervously. Jiang Hai, on the other hand, went to buy hamburgers. He had already eaten breakfast, but the smell of the hamburgers made him hungry again. So he ordered 3 three-story imperial castles, 2 large cups of cola, and a bag of fries. After that, he returned to Conrad. Seeing that Jiang Hai brought back the food, Conrad immediately took a sip of his drink without saying a word. His fan-like hands grabbed 2 imperial castles, 1 in each hand, tore off the wrapper, and stuffed them into his big mouth. Jiang Hai could eat 2 imperial castles to fill his stomach, but this guy ate 2 as if they were just filling the bottom. After the 2 imperial castles disappeared in a few mouthfuls, he picked up Jiang Hai's hamburgers. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai couldn't help but buy 3 more. This time, Jiang Hai took 1 and ate it himself. Sure enough, after eating 3 imperial castles, Conrad picked up 2 more and ate them, 1 on the left and 1 on the right. Unfortunately, 5 imperial castles weren't enough to satisfy his appetite. Seeing that he was about to finish, Jiang Hai went to buy 4 more. Looking at Conrad's ferocious eating, the other diners at the side were dumbfounded. When Conrad came in, these people who didn't know what was going on were still a little uneasy. But when they saw him destroy the imperial castles one after another, they were also a little dumbfounded. They had seen people who could eat a lot, but they had never seen someone who could eat so much. In total, Conrad ate 11 pieces of the 3-story imperial castle before he stopped with satisfaction. "You, a good man." After finishing the last of his drink, Conrad grinned at Jiang Hai and said with a serious face. Are you full? If not, let's continue." Looking at Conrad's appearance, Jiang Hai said seriously. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Conrad raised his head and said slowly, "I'm full. It can last for 3 days, 2 days. Hey, boss, you are here. The minibus is already here. Let's go." "Hey. Why is he here?" But at this time, the door of Burger King was pushed open, and Moses Adams came in from the outside. When Aphrodite and the others came down, they didn't find Jiang Hai. They thought that Jiang Hai and Moses Adams were together. As a result, when Moses Adams came down, he didn't find Jiang Hai. They were a little curious, but fortunately, the people at the front desk saw that Jiang Hai took Conrad to the burger shop opposite. So Moses Adams came to find him. When he came in, he saw Jiang Hai, and of course, Conrad opposite Jiang Hai. Seeing Moses Adams come in, Jiang Hai also looked at him. "Do you know him?" Pointing to Conrad opposite, Jiang Hai asked curiously. "Of course, didn't we see him when we went there?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams said seriously. "It seems that you still remember. Then why is he lying on the hotel lawn? Didn't he win that day? Looking at Moses Adams, Jiang Hai asked curiously. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams couldn't help but recall. Compared to Jiang Hai, who only went there once, Moses Adams went there several times in order to follow up on the matters that happened later. He also heard about this situation from his old classmate. Oh, I heard that it was because his injuries were quite serious. If he were to be treated, he would have to spend a lot of money, so his accomplice cheated him. After cheating him out of all his money, they threw him away. I didn't expect him to be in front of our hotel. Thinking hard about it, Moses Adams remembered his old friend's news and couldn't help but sigh. The gray world is like this, there is no law, no morality, everything is based on survival. Sometimes humans are the cruelest creatures in the world, this is the law of nature. Oh. There's such a story? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little surprised. To be honest, Jiang Hai thought of many possibilities at the beginning, but he really didn't think of this possibility. However, Jiang Hai wasn't running a charity. Although this person's experience made Jiang Hai feel a little emotional, he felt that he did a good job by treating him to a meal. After all, he didn't have any relationship with this man. The reason why he did this was mainly because he was in a good mood now. So after hearing this, Jiang Hai stood up, took out $200 from his wallet, and put it in front of Conrad. Big guy, I'm leaving. This money is for you to buy food. This time, don't be cheated by others. Looking at Conrad, Jiang Hai smiled and turned to leave, but Conrad grabbed his arm. Jiang Hai turned around and looked at Conrad in surprise. To be honest, Jiang Hai was a little surprised. His first thought now was that he was being blamed. But obviously, he was thinking too much, because Conrad grabbed Jiang Hai's arm, but didn't take the money on the table. Instead, he looked at Jiang Hai and said in a muffled voice, I can't take the money. Why? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was also a little surprised. What did he mean by that? My mom said that I can take other people's money. Money is earned through labor. Looking at Jiang Hai, Conrad's head and tongue were obviously not very clear as he spoke to Jiang Hai. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little stunned. Your mom is right, but this money is your reward for chatting with me. You'd better take it. Looking at this big guy, Jiang Hai smiled, but didn't take the money back. Instead, he smiled and said to him. Then, Jiang Hai activated his strength. Although this Conrad was quite strong, he was still nothing in front of Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai instantly shook off his arm. Then, Jiang Hai left the shop. But as soon as he left, Conrad followed him out, still holding the $200 that Jiang Hai gave him in his hand. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai didn't say anything. He was just being kind occasionally, and there was no need to say too much. But just as they were about to cross the road and head to the front of the bus in front of the hotel, the roar of an engine suddenly came from the distance, followed by an MPV speeding over from a corner. Chapter 320. Again. Jiang Hai narrowed his eyes when he saw the car rushing towards him and accelerating instead of slowing down. Such a situation had happened not long ago, and he had to spend 30 million to settle it. This time, he didn't know who had the guts to attack him again. Jiang Hai pulled Moses Adams' clothes and pushed him straight towards the hotel. Jiang Hai exerted force in his legs and prepared to move back in an instant. With his explosive strength, it was impossible for the car to hit him, especially when he was mentally prepared. But just as Jiang Hai was about to leave, he saw Conrad, who was originally behind him, rush over. With a bang, he knocked Jiang Hai away and replaced Jiang Hai's position. This position was not so easy to replace. Jiang Hai heard a loud bang and Conrad was sent flying by the speeding car. Years of internal injuries, coupled with his weak body, caused him to pass out when he was knocked out. The injury on his head also split open from the impact. However, the car did not have it easy either. After hitting Conrad, the car also turned a corner and crashed straight into the Carnival Hotel next to it. In an instant, it hit the lawn of the hotel, and then hit the stone in front of the hotel. Bastard. Looking at Conrad's situation, Jiang Hai could not help but curse. These people attacked him again and again. He wanted to see who was the one who did not want to live this time. Jiang Hai glanced at Conrad, who was still far away, and motioned for Moses Adams to make a call. He went straight to the front of the car and smashed the window of the driver's seat with a bang. He wanted to open the door, but just as his hand smashed the window, he heard many women screaming inside. What's the situation? When he heard these women screaming, Jiang Hai felt that something was wrong. But when he pulled the door down, the situation inside made Jiang Hai's right eyelid twitch unconsciously. Because at this time in the car, the driver had already been knocked out by the ejected airbag. His face was covered in blood, and it seemed that his nose was broken. Except for the driver, the others were still conscious. When they saw Jiang Hai, they did not stop screaming. It was not because they saw that Jiang Hai was too handsome, but because it was a car full of women. Including the driver, it seemed that they were a group of 17 or 18 years old students. They were obviously confused and had nothing else to do except scream. Looking at these women, Jiang Hai's sixth sense told him that this was really an accident. Damn, a road killer is also a killer. If you don't know how to drive, why are you driving? At the sight of the fainted female driver, Jiang Hai knew that he had encountered the legendary road killer. He cursed helplessly. Jiang Hai walked away again. Moses Adams also called the police. After calling the ambulance, he came to the front of the car. Looking at the situation inside, Moses Adams also looked at Jiang Hai helplessly. Obviously, it was difficult to reason with the female driver. This incident should not be deliberate. It could only be regarded as an accident. There was no other way except through the judicial process. Even if Jiang Hai wanted to sue them for murder, he had no way to do so. Because in this world, not only domestic female drivers were real murderers. Other than admitting that he was unlucky, there was nothing he could do. It was impossible for Jiang Hai to know this group of brats. At this time, Aphrodite and others also came out of the hotel. Seeing that Jiang Hai was fine, they were relieved. Although Miami was good, beautiful, and comfortable, they were not going to come here in the future because it seemed that this place was not suitable for Jiang Hai. Soon after they got out of the car, the police and paramedics came. When the police arrived, it was just a normal interrogation. The girls who were masked 13 were also brought out. Jiang Hai listened for a while and understood that these girls had some relationship with Jiang Hai. Because they were also from Boston, but they went to college in Boston. In order to celebrate the birthday of one of the girls, they decided to drive together. As a result, they originally just wanted to go back to Washington. They thought that since they were already here, and there was an accident after driving for so long, they wanted to go directly to Florida to play. As a result, when they were about to reach their destination, an accident happened. Looking at their confused look, the police also shrugged. It was not the first time they dealt with such a case. So after finishing the statement, they directly took these girls to the police station. Although the police dealt with it quickly, there were some problems with the paramedics. This person must be saved. This was in the spirit of humanitarianism, but the saved person had nothing else except an American household registration. Whether it was medical insurance, friends, or even an address, it made the hospital a little helpless. Because if they saved this person, it was very likely that the money would not be recovered. Of course, in the end, it was estimated that the money would be recovered from those girls, but what if the girls' family did not give it to them? Then they would have to trouble them. But the doctors here, although they were giving first aid, seemed a little absent-minded. Jiang Hai still had a plane in a while. Although he was also a victim, he just asked Moses Adams to follow up. But before he got in the car, he saw Conrad over there. Go and have a look. If you need medical expenses, I will pay all. Jiang Hai said to Moses Adams. Then he went to the minibus first and leaned in the middle of the last row. Jiang Hai raised his head helplessly. How could such a thing happen after he left? After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams also went over and said something to the doctor here. After leaving his phone number, he returned to the car. When the minibus drove away, Jiang Hai also glanced at Conrad behind. Sure enough, with a big lawyer as a guarantor, the paramedics' actions became faster. Soon the bleeding stopped, and he was sent to the hospital in the ambulance. Jiang Hai did not know what would happen to Conrad in the end, because at this time, he was a little homesick. From Miami to Boston, a 3-hour flight was not very difficult, especially in the first-class cabin. After watching 2 movies, Jiang Hai had already landed in Boston's General Barton Airport. When they came out of the airport, they saw that there were already people waiting for them in the airport's parking lot. Jiang Hai looked around and found that there were a lot of people. After Jiang Hai, Robbins Garcia and Edward Anderson left, the 2 people in charge of the manor naturally came. In addition, there was also Burke Dollar. The 3 of them drove 3 pickup trucks, so that they could pick up Jiang Hai and the others. In fact, Jiang Hai's battle shield only needed to move the seats, and it was not a problem to seat 10 people. However, Jiang Hai's battle shield could not be driven by anyone except him. It was his treasure. In addition to the 3 of them, there was also a girl standing there. This girl was not Shendy Clive, but Penelope Dollar, whom Jiang Hai had not seen for a while. Since the last police station incident, she had not appeared in front of Jiang Hai again. Perhaps she did not like Jiang Hai, or perhaps she did not want to have anything to do with her father's boss. Now she was here to pick up Moses Adams. Don't forget, she was Adams' assistant. However, with her presence, the atmosphere in the parking lot was a little strange. Burke Dollar and his girl did not get along very well. Hey, boss, did everything go well this time? Seeing Jiang Hai and the others coming over, Robbins Garcia stepped forward and hugged Jiang Hai, then said with a smile. That's natural. With me in charge, there's nothing that can't go smoothly. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also laughed. Humph, looking at Jiang Hai's proud look, Penelope Dollar couldn't help but snort softly, but although the sound was soft, it was still heard by Jiang Hai. When Jiang Hai looked at her, she deliberately looked away. So, your throats are better now? You can talk now? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Edward Anderson looked at these girls and said with a surprised look. He had to admit that technology is really advanced now. Of course, Uncle Anderson. Maybe children have the intention to show off. Hearing Anderson's words, Aphrodite and the others held back and just nodded with a smile, but Daliana had already spoken. Listening to Daliana's crisp voice, Anderson and the others were very surprised. They originally thought that she could speak, which means that she could make sounds. It would take some time before she could communicate normally, but what did they hear now? They didn't expect that Daliana and the others could speak so fluently when they came back, which really surprised them. This is really a miracle. Even Burke Dollar, who has always been silent, couldn't help but whisper at this time. Looking at everyone's surprised look, Jiang Hai just smiled and didn't say anything, because he didn't want to explain. Sometimes, some words are meaningless if they are too obvious. After a few words of greeting each other, Jiang Hai and the others also got in the car to go home. As for Moses Adams, his home is in Boston. He also said goodbye to Jiang Hai and left the airport in Penelope's car. Jiang Hai and the others also left the airport. One went north and the other went south. The incident in Miami came to an end. Sitting in the co-driver's seat of his original car, the F-650, Jiang Hai looked at the scenery in front of him that was becoming more and more familiar. Although the weather in Miami is better than here, the fish there grow faster than here, and the rhythm there is slower than here, don't forget that this is actually Jiang Hai's home. Chapter 321. I'm finally back. After opening the door of the villa, Jiang Hai threw himself heavily on the sofa, and Xiao Bai, Little Yellow, Dai Teeth, and Chirps, who got up with him, immediately ran to his side and kept rubbing against him. In fact, the moment Jiang Hai got out of the car, his pets ran over and surrounded him in the middle, constantly licking and rubbing against him to show their affection for Jiang Hai. It didn't even take this long for Jiang Hai to return to China last time. More than 10 days, he stayed there for more than 10 days. They didn't see Jiang Hai for half a month, so Little Gray and the others naturally missed him very much. Now that Jiang Hai was back, it would be strange if they didn't linger around him. Looking at these lively little guys, Jiang Hai first comforted them when he got out of the car. Coming back from the airport, in the spirit of a gentleman, well, Jiang Hai himself is not a gentleman. But at least it was necessary to send the girls back first, so Jiang Hai took a group of pets and sent Aphrodite and the others back to his small villa. Under the reluctant eyes of these girls, Jiang Hai waved his sleeves and didn't take away a single cloud. Back to his villa, Delina and Marian were the first to come in, and at this time, they were tidying up the room. As for Jiang Hai, he didn't care about his image at all and just lay on the sofa. It's really better to be in one's own dog house. Unknowingly, Jiang Hai has been here for almost half an hour. At this time, Delina and Marian came down from above. After the 3-hour flight, they were also very tired. After coming back, they first tidied up their things, then took a shower and changed into clean clothes before coming down. Seeing Jiang Hai lying there without caring about his image, they also came over. Jiang Hai, home is still the most comfortable. Lying on the back of the sofa, Delina looked at Jiang Hai and said with narrowed eyes. Of course, this is our home. Have you packed your things? After hearing Delina's words, Jiang Hai nodded affirmatively. Initially, he felt that it was a pity that he didn't choose to live in Miami. But as soon as he returned home, he no longer had such thoughts. Even if he would freeze like a dog in Winthrop in winter, it was still a unique experience. We've already finished packing. Jiang Hai, do you want us to help you pack your things? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Marian immediately said with a smile. This time they went to Miami, they also harvested a lot of new clothes and some gadgets. I can do it myself. At the mention of his luggage, Jiang Hai, who hadn't fully stretched himself yet, suddenly remembered that he still had $400 million worth of oil futures in his suitcase. He wouldn't be at ease if he didn't take them with him. So Jiang Hai forced himself to get rid of his fatigue. After saying goodbye to the two girls, he quickly ran to the second floor. He opened his suitcase. The square thing was sealed in a pocket at this time. Jiang Hai deliberately took it out and checked it. After confirming that there was no problem, he walked to his bed. Although Jiang Hai's bed is made of solid wood, it can still be pulled open. With the strength of his arms, the huge bed, bedboard, and mattress were lifted up by him. After that, they were supported by a hydraulic rod. After that, he slowly walked in. At the end of the bed, there was a small safe. But although this safe was small, it was the most expensive thing in Jiang Hai's house. According to money, this safe cost Jiang Hai 17 million. This was also the latest model of safe in Germany. It looked like an ordinary metal box, but in fact, this safe was not an ordinary existence. There were a total of 5 layers of trivia: password, fingerprint, iris, and the way to open it. If even one of them was wrong, the safe wouldn't open. If 3 mistakes were wrong, it would be permanently locked. As for forcibly breaking it, at least for now, it was impossible. Because this safe was made of chromium-iridium alloy, nothing could ever cut it open. This was why such a small safe was worth more than $2 million. After Jiang Hai entered his 5 procedures in order, he opened the box in front of him. Other people bought safes to store money or precious stones, but Jiang Hai's safes were filled with a pile of paper. For Jiang Hai, he wasn't interested in gems. Compared to gems, these papers were more valuable. Because the papers that were originally placed here were the manor's deeds, but now there was an extra stack of papers. Of course, The main reason was that his safe was really small, so small that it couldn't hold too many things. After resetting the safe, Jiang Hai left the bed and restored the bed to its original state. Jiang Hai also relaxed. The 400 million yuan oil futures was his last bargaining chip. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't use it. Relieved, Jiang Hai began to tidy up his bed, put his clothes in the wardrobe, and then went to take a shower. When he came out of the shower, he found that his phone was ringing. Hello? Jiang Hai curiously glanced at the name displayed on the phone. This made Jiang Hai a little surprised, because the person displayed on the phone was not someone else. It was his former classmate, Feng Yunshan, who had a night with him in China. But to be honest, if he didn't see this name, Jiang Hai would have almost forgotten her. Now, why did she call him? Phew, I finally got through to you. I thought you blacklisted me. As soon as the phone was connected, Feng Yunshan's slightly shy voice came from the other side, and Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel excited. Oh, cough, I was taking a shower just now. What's the matter? With an awkward cough, Jiang Hai asked strangely. This woman really hasn't called me before. What does this sudden call mean? Can't I call you if there's nothing? Really, okay, I won't mess with you. You promised me to let me go to your place to take a photo. Is it still reliable? Hearing Jiang Hai's explanation, Feng Yunshan first despised Jiang Hai, and then said to Jiang Hai casually, but the meaning of inquiry in her words was still very strong. Of course, no problem. You can come whenever you want. After recalling for a while, Jiang Hai naturally remembered that he had promised her. Originally, he thought it was just a polite remark, but he didn't expect that the other party really came to find him. However, Jiang Hai didn't care because he didn't care much about this, and he was very happy to have a friend come to play with him, especially his relationship with this friend was still unclear. So, that's great. Do you have a place to stay? Maybe I won't come alone. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunshan couldn't help but exclaim in surprise on the other side of the phone, but then her voice became smaller and she said to Jiang Hai. If too many people come, I may not be able to stay because other than my villa, all the other houses are occupied. If there are fewer people, I have enough guest rooms here. After thinking about it, he heard that there would be a lot of people when taking a photo. Jiang Hai couldn't afford to entertain so many people, so he said it vaguely. Oh, it's okay. It's just me and a sister. It's enough to have a room. We're not big shots. We'll bring our own makeup and clothes. When we take photos, we'll take photos with each other, but you have to help with the lighting or something. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunshan also laughed. This is not a problem. That's okay, I have no problem. When are you coming? Hearing Feng Yunshan say that there are only 2 people, Jiang Hai doesn't care. He still has a lot of guest rooms here. Not to mention 2, even 5 is within his acceptable range. Since you're here, then there's no problem. We'll leave on tomorrow's flight. Hearing that Jiang Hai has no problem, Feng Yunshan also showed the straightforwardness of Bing City's girls and said directly to Jiang Hai. When he heard that they would come tomorrow, Jiang Hai couldn't help but think about it. It's a 13-hour flight. According to the domestic flight, they will arrive almost the day after tomorrow. Okay, are you going to New York for a transfer or what? I'll pick you up in New York or Boston. Jiang Hai is quite satisfied that he can have a day to rest. The most important thing is that he has already said it, so he has to do it. It's better to be in New York. I haven't been to New York yet. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunshan couldn't help but whisper. This time, they mainly have to trouble Jiang Hai. If Jiang Hai said that he would pick them up in Boston, then they can only transfer. Now that Jiang Hai asked, she will tell him her thoughts. After all, for a young person, New York, the world's economic center, is very attractive. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also laughed. Okay, no problem. After all, it's only a 3-hour drive from his manor to New York, which is not particularly far. This time, they are fellow countrymen and it's not clear. Jiang Hai still has patience. After setting the time, Jiang Hai hung up the phone and put the phone in his pocket casually. Jiang Hai went downstairs. Unknowingly, it's getting late. He still has to prepare dinner. He is not hungry, but Daliana and Marian are hungry. When Jiang Hai went to prepare dinner, in the capital of Wuxia, in a high-end office building, Feng Yunshan also hung up the phone with a chuckle. She looked at a middle-aged man in front of her with a proud face, and the middle-aged man's face was a little embarrassed and flattering. Because to be exact, this middle-aged man is Feng Yunshan's boss, but everyone in the company knows that there is someone behind Feng Yunshan. That person's power is something that the boss of a small management company can't afford to provoke. It's done. I can go now. Feng Yunshan has applied to go to the United States to take photos since 2 months ago, but the company has not let her go. First, because she is very popular, and there are still some brands and car shows that need her. Second, because the cost of going to the United States is really high, and Feng Yunshan did not say that she will pay for herself, so the company is very tangled. Chapter 322. Some people can't live without love. For example, Fu Yuan, this guy got another girlfriend a few days ago. But at most, he only touched her hand. He didn't even kiss her on the lips. After that, he cried and complained to Jiang Hai on WeChat. But Jiang Hai and the rest were used to it. Because he was like this in the past. Now, they can't be bothered with him. If Jiang Hai remembered correctly, this was this guy's 4th girlfriend this year. Now, he is actively looking for a girlfriend. This is a person who will die without love. For some people, when love comes knocking on their door, they will accept it. Without love, they will stay passive. For example, Jiang Hai's other classmate, Su Wei. He is now staying at home all day. He met a girl from Sichuan on the internet. The two of them have been talking on the internet for 3 years, but they haven't even met. They said they are boyfriend and girlfriend, but he didn't ask her to come to Bing City, and she didn't ask him to come to Sichuan. This made Jiang Hai and the rest speechless. Is this okay? There are also some people who are too platonic. There is also a type of person who doesn't care if there is love or not. They can live without the opposite sex, and they can live very well. Feng Yunshan is such a person. All these years, she has been that person's mistress. Although they don't meet many times, she has saved a lot of money. Since she had sex with Jiang Hai, she stopped contacting that person this year. And that person doesn't know if it's because he feels guilty, but the room that Feng Yunshan stayed in is still hers. And every month, he would send her money, but he never came to look for her again. Feng Yunshan doesn't care. It's good to have a house to live in and money to spend. As for the company not letting her go to the United States to take photos, she said a few words at first, but later, she forgot about it. Maybe if this continues, Feng Yunshan might continue to live like this. But the bad thing is, the day before yesterday, when Feng Yunshan passed by Qi Li's Western restaurant, she found that Qi Li and Jiang Hai seemed to be getting closer. This made her a little anxious. Who is Qi Li? Wouldn't it be as easy as playing with her? She knew that there must be something going on between Qi Li and Jiang Hai. As long as Qi Li wanted to, not only would she not be able to survive, but the person behind her would also be finished. The reason why she was fine now was mainly because of her relationship with Jiang Hai. Therefore, she was really determined this time. She insisted on going to America for a photo shoot, but her boss was still unwilling to let her go. Even though she said that she only wanted the company's travel expenses and equipment, her boss was still a little conflicted. In the end, her boss said that as long as she contacted the location and brought a newcomer there, he would take care of the travel expenses and equipment. That was how the conversation on the screen happened. Sister Chen, if you say there's no problem, then there's no problem. Looking at Feng Yunshan, the manager said with an apologetic smile. Tisk, if it wasn't for my strength, would you have let him go? What a joke. Tell me, which little slut do you want me to bring along this time? Casually putting her bag on the table, Feng Yunshan took out a woman's cigarette and lit it gently in her mouth. After exhaling a puff of smoke, she said to the manager. Actually, Feng Yunshan didn't know how to smoke. What she smoked now was just through the barrel. She spat it out after one round in her mouth. This was actually something that couldn't be helped. In this industry, if she didn't mingle a little, then anyone would dare to ride on her head. Xiaoxi, come in. Hearing her words, the manager smiled awkwardly and then shouted outside. Then, as the door opened, a beautiful figure appeared in front of Feng Yunshan. Even when Feng Yunshan saw this person, she couldn't help but be stunned for a moment because this woman was indeed very beautiful. Sister Chen, let me introduce you. This is AI Xiaoxi, our company's newly signed artist. Now, she's going to shoot her debut photo. Instead of shooting in the country, it's better to go abroad to have more influence. This time, I'll have to trouble you, Sister Chen. Looking at the beautiful girl standing there, the manager stood up. His perverted hand unconsciously touched the girl named AI Xiaoxi's arm. When the girl was touched, she subconsciously shrank back, but she didn't dare to dodge. The aggrieved expression on her face also flashed by. Oh, when did you take care of a newcomer like this? Your little secretary? The manager's action and AI Xiaoxi's expression were all reflected in Feng Yunshan's eyes. She knew that there must be a story behind this, but this industry had its own rules. If someone was willing to hit or suffer, then it had nothing to do with her. However, a few teasing words were inevitable. Hey, you can't speak carelessly. If my wife hears it, you guys can go to the moat to fish me out tomorrow. Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, the manager panicked a little and immediately said. Hey, I'm too lazy to care about your damn business. Little girl, come with me. I'll give you a few instructions. Feng Yunshan looked at this lecherous but cowardly guy with disdain. She stood up and said to AI Xiaoxi as she walked out. Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, AI Xiaoxi's eyes flashed with a trace of gratitude. After bowing to the manager, she immediately left with Feng Yunshan. After leaving the manager's office, she also let out a long breath. That, Sister Chen, thank you. Seeing Feng Yunshan continue to walk forward, she immediately chased after her and whispered. You don't have to thank me. Although I don't know why you want to be in this industry, you have to understand that in this industry, being so shy won't work. Unless you're pretending to be shy to attract other people's chips, otherwise, you have to be more open. Since you've made a choice, it's fine as long as you don't regret it. Okay, you go back and pack up. We'll fly to the United States the day after tomorrow. Glancing at the girl behind her, Feng Yunshan couldn't help but remember her appearance when she first entered the industry. It was really an unbearable experience. She was forced to drink, framed, and beaten by a female colleague in the same company in the toilet, but fortunately, she survived these things. Now she, Feng Yunshan, no matter whether she is a fox pretending to be a tiger or not, in this company, she means what she says, and this all depends on practice. Then what do I have to prepare? Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, the girl named AI Xiaoxi asked timidly. Take all your sexy clothes with you and wash yourself clean. Don't think that we're going to have fun this time. We're going to work. Who knows, we might even have to serve men. Hearing AI Xiaoxi's words, Feng Yunshan waved her hand and strode out of the company. The appearance of this AI Xiaoxi suddenly made her a little annoyed. Ah. Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, AI Xiaoxi's face couldn't help but turn pale in an instant. She was already mentally prepared for the first thing, but the latter sentence. But she didn't dare to ask now, so she could only go home nervously. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't know the situation in Wuxia. Now he was eating steak at home happily. He had to admit that Jiang Hai's steak was good. Even if it was not well done, the raw materials made up for all the shortcomings in craftsmanship. After eating a delicious dinner, Jiang Hai went back to sleep. After sleeping in the big bed of the hotel for many days, Jiang Hai suddenly returned to the bed he was used to. For the first time, Jiang Hai didn't roll for long and fell asleep. After getting up early the next morning, Jiang Hai also started his schedule for the day. Of course, it was not right to call it a schedule, because it was mainly in the manner. He first went to the cowshed and gave Garcia and the others gifts. There were only two kinds of gifts that Jiang Hai picked when he came back: wine and straw hats. The straw hats were for all the women in the manor, and the wine was naturally for the cowboys, fishermen, Dulles Gerard, and Connor Murphy. After Jiang Hai had a taste of their wine in Miami, he had recently become interested in those slightly sweet wines. When he came back, he deliberately brought a lot of bottles, 1 bottle for each person, and he could still have more than 10 bottles left. After delivering the wine, Jiang Hai also looked at the cows. After finding that there was no problem with them, he also learned about the situation of the cows from Garcia. During the half a month when Jiang Hai was away, except for Chi Li, both Zhang Dihai and Pra Walton had contacted the warehouse, transportation, and so on. They had also come here to pick the cows. In about a week or so, they would come to slaughter the cows they picked. The first batch of cows was a total of 1,200, of which 1,000 were Pra Waltons and 200 were Zhang Dihai's. These were all already studied, so Jiang Hai did not have to worry about it. After walking around the cowshed and riding Xiao Xia for a while, Jiang Hai went to the beach. He also delivered wine to Edward Anderson and asked about the recent problems of the fishing industry. The news that they received was quite good. Among the fish that Jiang Hai raised, the biggest one was almost mature. This made Edward Anderson very surprised. This was because they originally thought that Jiang Hai's fish would take at least 3 years to mature, while the salmon would take at least a year to mature. Next year, March to May would be the right time for the fish to bloom. But this time, Jiang Hai's fish would be ready to bloom. As for the American red fish, which had the largest population, it would take about 1.5 to 2 years to mature. However, it had only been 2 months, and the speed at which the fish grew caught them by surprise. A few days ago, they fished out a longzhu at a fixed location. This guy had already grown to 50 centimeters long. An adult fish was only 60 to 70 centimeters long. This guy had only been put in for 2 months and it had already grown so big. It really scared Ai Dehua and the others. If they did not know that this kind of fish did not exist in the Atlantic Ocean, they would have suspected that it had swum over. As for the American red fish, they had grown to more than 25 centimeters, which was almost the same length as raising them for a year. Chapter 323. Maybe the water quality here is better. Hearing Edward Anderson's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile awkwardly. Of course, he knew what was going on. It was nothing more than his aura. Before entering the ocean, Jiang Hai used his own spiritual qi to nourish these fish and the like. Although there were millions of fish fry, such a small amount of spiritual energy was not enough for them to evolve, but it could ensure their survival to the greatest extent, in addition to allowing them to grow quickly. In addition, the seaweed planted by Jiang Hai also added aura. After the seaweed itself grew, it exuded a subtle aura, improving the plankton around it. The small fish and shrimp that ate these seaweed and plankton would also increase their weight and physical fitness after absorbing the aura. When the fry ate these small fish and shrimp and digested the aura, they would naturally grow faster, which was also an innate advantage. However, Jiang Hai knew this matter, but it didn't mean that he would tell others. He was not prepared to share this secret with anyone. I hope so. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Edward Anderson also nodded. In fact, from the beginning, he felt that Jiang Hai was not an ordinary person, but what did it matter? As long as he didn't endanger him, it didn't matter. The fish here grew big, and it was a gift from God, so Edward Anderson still calmly accepted Jiang Hai's words. As for the others, as long as he didn't care, they naturally wouldn't care. After patrolling his territory and giving gifts to everyone, Jiang Hai drove to the town with a special gift. He naturally came here to give a gift. The person who gave the gift was none other than Shendy Clive. If it weren't for her relationship, Jiang Hai wouldn't have gone to Miami, let alone make money. Not to mention Delina's illness, Jiang Hai would have definitely come to give her a gift, whether it was for public or private reasons. Before coming, Jiang Hai didn't call Shendy Clive, which was a surprise. When he drove to the town, it was obvious that the people in the town were relatively friendly to Jiang Hai. In the winter, it was no secret that Jiang Hai funded the construction of a primary school. At the same time, Jiang Hai also participated in the sea god ceremony last time, so everyone had some impression of Jiang Hai. Seeing him driving to the town, many people greeted him. Jiang Hai naturally responded to them one by one. He really didn't expect that he was so popular here. On the way to Winthrop Primary School, there was a red light in the town. Jiang Hai naturally had to stop at the red light. When he stopped, he happened to see a flower shop on the roadside. Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned. Although Jiang Hai was a bit dull, he was not stupid. The gift he gave was not small, but it was not very good. Women all liked flowers. He had never given flowers in his life. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai parked the car on the roadside and walked into the flower shop. As soon as he walked in, a girl came to Jiang Hai. "Hello, do you want to buy flowers?" Hearing the girl's loud voice, Jiang Hai glanced at her. The girl didn't look very old, but she wasn't young either. She was about 17 or 18 years old, about 1.7 meters tall, with 2 braids on her blonde hair. She wasn't very good looking, but she was very bright. There were some small freckles on her face, which made her look very cute. At this time, she was standing in front of Jiang Hai with a smile and asked Jiang Hai with a smile. "Oh, yes, I want to buy a bunch of flowers. Do you have any recommendations?" Looking at the messy variety of flowers in the flower shop, Jiang Hai couldn't help but have a headache. To be honest, he didn't recognize 9 out of 10 of these flowers. "Are you going to give it to your girlfriend?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl couldn't help but squint her eyes and smile. Not yet. Is there anything special about this?" Hearing the girl's words and thinking back to Shendy Clive, although Jiang Hai had some feelings for her, the two hadn't reached the point of being friends. At least, Jiang Hai didn't think that it was suitable for him to be friends with others before he and Shi Li had completely broken up. It could be seen that the girl was very talkative. Hearing Jiang Hai's doubts, she explained to Jiang Hai, "Of course, every flower has a different flower language, such as roses. Different colors and different appearances naturally represent different meanings. Red roses represent passion, so basically, men and women who have confirmed their relationship will give red roses. Pink roses represent touching, a declaration of love, first love. If used for confession, it would be pink roses. White roses represent purity, which is not very suitable for a girlfriend. Yellow roses represent blessings. Generally speaking, when lovers give this to each other, it means that they are going to break up peacefully. Green roses represent youth. Generally, they are not given to lovers, but if some friends leave us at a young age, they can give this. Blue roses represent mystery, preciousness, and also represent something that can't be obtained. If you have a crush on someone, this is the best gift. Light blue roses are called blue roses, which represent commitment. The number of roses given is different, and there are different sayings. Purple represents romance, indigo represents preciousness, orange represents youthfulness, light green represents innocence, orange red represents friendship, black represents challenge, and champagne represents happiness. This kind of Lori Massey is usually given to lovers who have left us. The girl could see Jiang Hai's hesitation. He definitely wanted to give it to this girl, especially since this girl was very likely to be related to Jiang Hai. If he wanted to give it to his mother or other people, he would definitely give it to them, and he wouldn't show a puzzled expression when she asked. Since he wanted to give roses, she naturally had to explain it clearly. There are so many things to pay attention to. Jiang Hai was very interested in animals, but as for flowers and plants, It was just a so-so, so he really didn't study these things and see what they were. Now, he was a little confused. Although he understood the meaning of these flowers, Jiang Hai still couldn't make a decision. Because there were some small problems between his relationship with Sheikh Clive. You already know the flower language, but you still can't make a decision. Can you tell me more? I can help you refer to it. Looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, the girl also smiled. It was her habit to help customers within her scope. More than friends, but not yet lovers. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai used a word to describe his relationship with Sheikh Clive. Then it's like this. The outer circle of orange represents friendship, and the inner circle of pink represents your heart. It's not as conspicuous as red, and it's not like other colors. It doesn't point out the meaning of your heart. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl recommended. Okay, then it's like this. Hearing the girl's words, Jiang Hai also nodded. This kind of distribution was really good. Then how many do you want? I'll match the color for you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl here said happily. 66. Our Hua Xia is more particular about this. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai said to the girl. In fact, in Europe and the United States, although the number of flowers sent is a little particular, it is not very particular. Other than the unlucky number 13, everything else was fine. It was unlike in China, where 11 was wholeheartedly dedicated. In fact, it was more of a homophone. Although there was a limit to the number of gifts given here, it was not a lot. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the girl also laughed. 66 flowers is a big job, so she immediately began to do it. Not long after, a bouquet of 66 flowers appeared in front of Jiang Hai. The price of the flowers is naturally different, but Jiang Hai bought the better ones. Of course, whether it is good or not is up to the girl, so 80 cents per flower, 66 flowers are $42.24 in total. Jiang Hai directly gave her $50, and the rest is her tip. Holding the flowers, Jiang Hai went to the car, put the flowers in the passenger seat, and drove to the town's elementary school. When he arrived, the elementary school was about to be over. Although it is a public elementary school, cars are really too popular in the United States. Just like bicycles in China, almost every family has one, and the price is not expensive. Although the Americans don't spoil their children as much as the people in China, in addition to taking the school bus, there are naturally people who come to pick up the elementary school. So when Jiang Hai arrived, there are already a lot of cars parked outside the elementary school. Of course, there are parents next to the cars. However, the quality of the parents in the United States is really good. At least, there is no one blocking the road. Everyone consciously lined up in a long line, and the people who came later lined up at the back. There is no one who wants to push forward. Although Jiang Hai wasn't here to pick up the children, he was here to pick up people. So he didn't push to the front. Instead, he lined up at the back. When his car stopped, many people around him turned to look at him. In fact, although the war shield is much lower than the F615 F750, the metal feel of the material, coupled with the domineering appearance, is indeed very attractive, especially to some men. Few men are not interested in these things. Guns, weapons, cars, airplanes, battleships, tanks, and so on. These things show the character of a man, no matter the time, are extremely attractive. Of course, there are some girls who are not in this category. It seems that Jiang Hai has unknowingly opened his mouth again. But at this time, he does not have any thoughts, and jumped out of the car with the bouquet of flowers. Chapter 324. Oh, it's him. When Jiang Hai jumped out of the car, many people who had been paying attention to him couldn't help but say, oh. Originally, when the battle shield was driven here, many people were curious about whose car it was. After all, this car was not very common even in the United States. Of course, if it was in some rich areas, there would still be some. However, Winthrop was not a place where people could afford to live. Most of the cars here were basically Ford, Chevrolet, Buick, and so on. Of course, there were also some Japanese cars. After all, Japanese cars were very cheap here. Jiang Hai's car was definitely very expensive here. So when Jiang Hai drove over, they were curious about who the owner of the car was. When Jiang Hai got out of the car, they all said, "Oh." It was Jiang Hai's car. Based on their understanding, Jiang Hai was worthy of being the richest man in Winthrop. Holding the flowers and gifts, Jiang Hai ignored the gazes of the people around him and slowly walked to the school gate. When he walked to the school gate, the sound of the Winthrop Primary School being dismissed could be heard. The teachers in the United States almost never held classes, nor did they keep the students. Of course, they mainly targeted the primary school students. Their homework was practically non-existent. Therefore, as soon as school was over, some of the children who had been waiting for school to end were the first to rush out when the teacher announced the end of class. They went to their own wardrobes to change their shoes and clothes before running out. In the United States, regardless of whether it was primary school or middle school, the basic configuration was that every student had a special small cabinet in the corridor. Only the students had the keys to the cabinet. Inside the cabinet were clothes, books, shoes, and other sundries. In this way, when they went to school, they didn't need to carry too many things in their backpacks. If it wasn't a very important class, they could come here to get their things before class. It was a very convenient design. After the bell rang, in less than a minute, some anxious children ran out of the school. They glanced at Jiang Hai, who was standing at the gate. There was some curiosity in their eyes, but they didn't pay too much attention to him. For these children, now was the time to go home, eat, and go out to play. Seeing the children running past him one by one, Jiang Hai couldn't help but stretch his neck to look inside the school. After waiting for about 10 minutes, the corners of Jiang Hai's mouth curled up into a smile, because the beautiful figure he was waiting for reflected in his eyes. The black woman who was talking to her was ignored by Jiang Hai. Sandy. Seeing that SH-20 Clive was halfway away, Jiang Hai couldn't help but call out loudly. Hearing Jiang Hai's voice, SH-20 Clive was stunned. Then he turned his head in confusion and saw Jiang Hai standing there with flowers in his hands. The moment he saw Jiang Hai, SH-20 Clive's eyes flashed with excitement. He subconsciously took a step forward, but he seemed to think of something and immediately stopped. He looked at the black woman next to him apologetically. "Well, Sandy, go, I won't laugh at you." The black woman saw SH-20 Clive's expression. Looking at his anxious look, the woman smiled and joked. "What are you talking about, Mary, really?" Although he said this, SH-20 Clive didn't slow down. He smiled apologetically at the black woman, and before he finished his words, he had already walked quickly toward Jiang Hai. Seeing SH-20 Clive coming over, Jiang Hai couldn't help but take a few steps forward. "You bad guy, when did you come back?" Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, SH-20 Clive asked him first before she could speak. It could be seen that she was very happy about Jiang Hai's sudden appearance. "I just came back last night. I rested for a while, then I immediately came to find you. This is for you." After Jiang Hai finished speaking, he gave the flowers in his hand and the gift he carefully prepared. "Oh, thank you." Looking at this big bouquet of flowers, SH-20 Clive couldn't help but smile. Her squinted eyes were full of love. Maybe at this time, if Jiang Hai gave her a green foxtail, she would be so happy. "Do you have an appointment tonight? Why don't we go eat something delicious?" Looking at SH-20 Clive's surprised look, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. "I want to eat at your house. I haven't eaten your steak for half a month. I miss it so much." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, SH-20 Clive also said happily. It was unknown whether she missed the steak or the owner of the steak. "Of course, no problem." Hearing SH-20 Clive's words, Jiang Hai also smiled and said with a serious face. Just as the two of them were about to leave to get their car, a red Ferrari suddenly sped over from a corner in the distance. When it arrived at the school gate, it braked and stopped steadily in front of the school gate. When they saw the car, not only SH-20 Clive, but also the nearby parents and the guards showed a look of disgust on their faces. SH-20 Clive also looked at Jiang Hai with some concern. "Hey, Sandy, I booked a table at XX restaurant in Boston. Let's go now." The car stopped, and a man who looked 27 or 28 years old also came out of the car. This man is a pure white man. He is quite handsome. He has long blonde hair and the whole person looks very refreshing. Although the temperature in Boston is not low now, this guy is not wearing thin clothes. Like Jiang Hai, today he only wore a t-shirt and a pair of thin trousers. But this guy was still wearing a leather coat, like a maggot. Jiang Hai looked at him and felt hot. He is also holding a big stick of flowers in both hands, but the color is completely different from Jiang Hai's, because it is a big stick of fiery red roses. If it was before, Jiang Hai might not care because he doesn't understand the language of flowers. But as soon as he was popularized, he knew that the meaning of this flower is not so simple. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai can't help but have some doubts. Is it my wishful thinking? This made him glance at SH-20 Clive next to him, but when he saw the strong disgust on SH-20 Clive's face, Jiang Hai laughed at himself. It seems that he is thinking too much. Then he couldn't help but look at this guy. He is so arrogant and he doesn't know what the hell is going on. "This is for you. Let's go, Sandy." But when Jiang Hai was looking at him, this guy looked at Jiang Hai with disdain, then ignored Jiang Hai. He stretched out one hand, wanting to pass the flowers to SH-20 Clive, and the other hand was about to grab Sandy's arm. This made Jiang Hai really angry. Who does this guy think he is? Just when Jiang Hai was about to make a move, SH-20 Clive took the initiative to take a step back, leaned her body against Jiang Hai's side, and dodged the guy's hand. At the same time, she frowned and looked at this guy unhappily. "Mr. Kuwei, we are not familiar with each other. Please call me Miss Clive, and I didn't say that I want to eat with you. I still have an appointment, and I think I said that this is a school, so don't park your car here." Looking at this guy, SH-20 Clive's face was full of disgust, and she said unhappily. Hearing her words, this guy couldn't help but laugh. "In this town, I can park my car wherever I want. Who dares to stop me?" The man named Kirk opened his hands and said arrogantly. Listening to his loud words, the people next to him glared at him, but no one dared to come and find trouble with him. Such a scene was really difficult to appear in the territory of the United States. "You're driving so fast. Have you ever thought about what would happen if you hit someone?" Hearing this, Jiang Hai felt that he couldn't stand it anymore. He patted SH-20 Clive's shoulder. This was the good thing about him, he was not afraid of power. "It's none of your business. I like to drive fast. If I hit someone, I will pay. I have money. If you have the ability, you can find the police to punish me." This guy shook his shoulder proudly and looked at Jiang Hai with an arrogant face. His tone was really asking for a beating. "If you say so, then I can sue you for murder." Because he had been with Moses Adams for a long time, Jiang Hai's eloquence had improved a little. He now knew how to put a big label on someone's head. "Don't talk nonsense, you son of a b*tch. When did I commit murder?" Accidentally hitting someone with a car and intentional murder were not the same. When the guy heard Jiang Hai's words, he couldn't help but shout loudly. "Deliberately driving a fast car to hit someone, that's murder. Idiot, when your mother gave birth to you, did she throw you away and raise the placenta?" Jiang Hai was amused when he heard the other party spouting nonsense. "Do you think he's a good person?" When it came to swearing, even if all the people in the United States combined their words, they still wouldn't be a match for a Chinese woman. "What the f*** are you talking about?" Sure enough, when this guy heard Jiang Hai's words, he was angry. He came in front of Jiang Hai and wanted to pull Jiang Hai's collar with both hands, but Jiang Hai lifted him up with one hand. He didn't give him time to talk. Jiang Hai directly pushed him with his right hand and sent him flying. With a clang sound, this guy had already sat on the front hood of his Ferrari. The huge impact smashed the window with spiderweb-like cracks, and the front hood was also bent. Who the F***CK? This blow caused this guy to fall quite heavily. He sat in the car, clutching his waist as he howled in pain. Who the hell is this guy? So arrogant, no one dares to stop him. Looking at this guy's painful appearance, Jiang Hai turned his head indifferently and asked Clive. When did Winthrop people become so arrogant? Chapter 325. This man is the nephew of Mayor Kirk. I heard that Mayor Kirk is recently applying for funding from the state to turn Winthrop into a small tourist spot, and this guy's father is the person in charge of tourism in the state government. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Clive came to Jiang Hai's side and whispered. Hearing this, Jiang Hai suddenly realized that this guy dared to be so arrogant here for this reason. According to Jiang Hai's understanding, if it wasn't related to their own interests, this guy dared to drive fast on the road in front of the school gate, endangering the lives of their children. Those fishermen, workers, and rough men would not let this guy go. They would have beaten him up long ago. Who cares who this guy's father is? Not to mention that this guy's father is just a leader in charge of tourism in the state. Even if his father is the governor, they would probably beat him up. In the United States, it has always been said that all people are equal. Their honor and status are not appointed by the people above, but by the people. If such a scandal is exposed, not to mention him, even his father will have to leave immediately. In the United States, the public opinion of dozens of people is already a very important thing. If hundreds of people are involved, even the state government can't suppress it. They need to use the power of the United States Congress. This is what it means to disperse power into the hands of the people. But the reason why he is so arrogant now is mainly because of his father. Winthrop is located on the edge of Boston's metropolitan area. In fact, this place is no longer Boston's territory. Since more than 100 years ago, when people settled here, this place has actually been a major fishing development area. However, there will be a day when all the fish will be caught. Now, the fish resources in Boston Bay are gradually drying up. Coupled with the impact of large-scale ocean fisheries, although the local fishing industry here is not like Newfoundland, one of the 4 major fisheries in Canada, where there is no fish to catch, the price of fish cannot be sold. But the cost of living is gradually increasing, and dollars are becoming less and less valuable. This is also an inevitable reason. Therefore, if Winthrop wanted to develop and let the residents of the town live a better life, it needed to develop a side business. Tourism was one of the best choices. This method could attract a large number of foreign tourists. Not only could it make the town famous, but it could also allow the town's residents to do some small businesses. Most of the children who came to Winthrop Elementary School came from poor families. It was precisely because of this that they hoped to do well in the tourism industry so that they could earn more money. That was why he allowed this guy to be so arrogant here. Otherwise, he would have been beaten away long ago. As for Clive, he was invited by the mayor to be his brother's tour guide last week. It was also at that time that this guy had taken a liking to her. He had already been pestering her for a week. You dare to hit me, you actually dare to hit me, I'm telling you, you're dead. Clutching his lower back, the man slowly climbed out of the car. Seeing his beloved car in such a state, he couldn't help but feel angry. Did I hit you? What evidence do you have to say that I hit you? You can eat whatever you want, but you can't say whatever you want. Which eye of mine saw me hit you? Do you have any evidence? You clearly sat in the car yourself. With his arms crossed, Jiang Hai looked at this guy and said with a look of contempt. This guy has angered everyone, how dare he yell here? Do you think these people are blind? They all saw it. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the man here roared loudly. Originally, he was hoping that one or two people would come out, but after waiting for a long time, there was no sound at all. When he looked over, he found that everyone was looking at him funny, but they didn't speak. You unruly people. There is a camera here, there is a video here. Looking at the silent crowd, the guy pointed to the camera at the school gate and shouted loudly. Are you sure you want to see it? You should know that you came up first, and you even exceeded the speed limit. If I remember correctly, you also said that you deliberately exceeded the speed limit, and the purpose was to kill people. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh and said indifferently. What nonsense are you talking about? Looking at Jiang Hai's indifferent appearance, this guy couldn't help but take a step forward. But then he remembered Jiang Hai's fighting strength and abruptly stopped his step. Originally, he was about to spit out a curse, but at this time, he changed his expression. Although he was still trying to put up a strong front, anyone with a discerning eye could see that he was terrified. I can prove it, he really said that he wanted to kill people. At this time, the old security guard Uncle Kyle, who had been staying behind Jiang Hai, walked out and said with a face that deserved a beating. This old security guard was the old man who pulled Jiang Hai to brag. At this time, the old man naturally didn't like this guy named Kirk, so he stood up for Jiang Hai and said, You are ruthless. Knowing that he was not welcomed here, this Kirk had no other choice but to swallow his pride. After all, a wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. Now he can't beat Jiang Hai. In the end, he cursed secretly. He didn't pick up the bouquet on the ground and went directly back to his sports car. Although his Ferrari was not the best, it was still very expensive. It was much more expensive than the average Mercedes-Benz and BMW. Naturally, its quality was also very good. After getting in, he started the engine. It could still be driven, so he left quickly. Looking at his back after he left, Jiang Hai couldn't help but curl his lips, but at the same time, he remembered what Clive had just said. The town was going to be developed, and he had now regarded this town as his home. If the town was going to be developed, then Jiang Hai could also contribute, but in the end, he still had to go to the mayor's house to ask. Sandy, do you know the address of Mayor Wallace's house? Looking at Clive, who showed a trace of worry on her face, Jiang Hai asked her. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, although Sandy didn't know what Jiang Hai wanted to do, she guessed that Jiang Hai might have beaten this guy and felt that the development of the town might be hindered, so he wanted to talk to the mayor. I know, but it's okay, Mayor Wallace is famous for being a good mayor, he won't blame you for this. Looking at Jiang Hai, Clive smiled and said seriously. I know, I have something else to talk to him about. Let's go eat first. After eating, you can take me to the mayor's house. Jiang Hai smiled and said to Clive, then took her to his shield. Under everyone's envious eyes, Jiang Hai left with Clive. Some of these people were envious of Jiang Hai's car, and some were envious of Jiang Hai being so close to Clive. After all, this most beautiful flower was a goddess in these people's eyes. Of course, some women were envious of Clive, who could climb up a big tree like Jiang Hai. But at this time, the two didn't think much about it. After all, the relationship between the two was still a bit hazy. About 10 minutes later, Jiang Hai arrived outside a Western restaurant under the guidance of Clive. After parking the car, the two walked into the Western restaurant and had a romantic dinner, but still somewhat embarrassing. Jiang Hai really didn't care about other people's gazes. Generally speaking, eating Western food was rarely enough to fill one's stomach. After all, it took a long time for the dishes to be served, and the food was small. However, Jiang Hai was an exception. Because he couldn't fill his stomach, he would spend money until he was full. Of course, this way of eating would attract other people's attention, but for Jiang Hai, he didn't care about it. Whether he was full or not was actually the most important thing. Fortunately, Clive already knew about Jiang Hai's habits, so they didn't care about it. After the two were full, they went to the supermarket in town and bought a bottle of red wine as a gift. Then they went to Mayor Wallace's house. Mayor Wallace lived in the town. It was only about a 5-minute drive from the town hall. Of course, it was such a short distance. Usually, Mayor Wallace wouldn't drive to work. He basically walked. The old people in Winthrop were all familiar with his address, because they had more or less been there before. When Jiang Hai's car stopped in front of Mayor Wallace's house, the old man happened to come out to throw out the trash. When he saw Jiang Hai's car, he was stunned. It wasn't easy to mistake this car. Not to mention the license plate, this was the only one in town. Jiang, oh, and Sandy, what can I do for you? Seeing Jiang Hai and Clive get out of the car, Mayor Wallace wiped his hands with his pajamas. After all, he had just thrown out the trash. Although it wasn't dirty, he didn't know what the other party was thinking. Therefore, it was more polite to wipe his hands before shaking hands. Oh, Uncle Kirk, don't you know what happened just now? Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Clive asked with some surprise. It has been more than 2 hours since the incident at the school gate. Mayor Wallace didn't receive any news? After that guy was beaten, didn't he come to his uncle to yell? Hearing Clive's words, Mayor Wallace also said with a smile, it's about the conflict between Jiang and Hewlett. I know. Just now, that guy ran over and yelled at me, but I beat him up. Listening to his words, he really didn't seem angry, which made Jiang Hai and Sandy speechless. If this is the case, then you should go back quickly. Jiang did the right thing. I have nothing to be dissatisfied with. If I knew what that guy had done these days, not to mention Jiang Hai, I would beat him up. It's too shameful. With a wave of his hand, Mayor Wallace said indifferently. Although he wanted to develop Winthrop, he didn't want to sell his soul. This is one thing, and I want to talk to you about the tourist spots. Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai chuckled. With his understanding of Mayor Wallace, although family is important, it is not to the extent that he would protect them in order to protect his family. Now what Mayor Wallace said is what Jiang Hai wants to hear the most, and it is also someone who is worthy of his cooperation. Oh. Then come in. Hearing Jiang Hai talking about the tourist spots, not only Mayor Wallace, but also Clive was stunned. She originally thought that Jiang Hai came to talk about his conflict with that guy, but she didn't expect there to be other things. Mayor Wallace was also a little surprised when he heard Jiang Hai's words. Although he knew that Jiang Hai was rich, he didn't know how much money Jiang Hai had. And judging from Jiang Hai's usual behavior, he didn't seem to be very interested in integrating into this town and this group. Now that Jiang Hai said that he wanted to talk to him about the tourist spots, he was also a little surprised. But anyway, Jiang Hai was also a rich man, a big taxpayer in the town. If he didn't say it, it didn't matter. But if he said it, he still had to listen. So Mayor Wallace signaled to Jiang Hai and Clive. Then they walked into Mayor Wallace's house. When they opened the door, Jiang Hai saw an old woman sitting on the sofa, watching TV. When she saw Mayor Wallace come in with Jiang Hai, the woman also stood up and looked at Mayor Wallace curiously, as if she was asking something. This is my wife, Maggie. This is Clive's eldest daughter, who you should have met before. She is the best teacher in our primary school. This is Jiang Hai, Sandy's boyfriend, and also the richest man in our town. He is the owner of the Green Forest, oh no, the Soaring Dragon Manor. Well, Maggie, go and make 3 cups of coffee, we still have something to talk about. Seeing the old woman's gaze, Wallace smiled and introduced her to the 3 who were curious. The 3 nodded to indicate that they were greeting each other. Mayor Wallace's wife came over and took the bottle of medicinal wine as a gift, then walked into the kitchen. Then Mayor Wallace took Jiang Hai upstairs, where his study was. After the 3 people sat down, not long after, Mayor Wallace's wife came in, put 3 cups of coffee on the table, and left the study. At this time, Mayor Wallace also picked up the coffee cup in front of him and took a sip. Come, try it. My wife made coffee, the taste is still very good. Mayor Wallace smiled at Jiang Hai and Clive in front of him and said to them with satisfaction. Hearing his words, although Jiang Hai didn't want to drink coffee, he also took a sip. The taste was indeed very strong. However, he didn't come here to drink coffee. After putting down the coffee cup, Jiang Hai looked at Mayor Wallace in front of him and said, Mayor, this time I came to look for you mainly to talk about the tourism. Chapter 326. Can you tell me in detail about the plan for our town? In the study of Mayor Wallace, Jiang Hai looked at the respectable old man in front of him and said seriously. This was the first time that Clive had seen Jiang Hai so serious since she met him. For a moment, she really looked like a girlfriend, sitting beside Jiang Hai without saying a word. The town's plan is very simple. As you know, our town doesn't develop industry, and we don't plan to sell land and let those foreign factories destroy our environment. But the environment is good, but the living standards of the residents really can't improve. So I'm thinking about how to let the residents of the town get more income without destroying here. After taking another sip of coffee, Mayor Wallace spoke slowly. As the highest person in charge of the town, he thought that he had an obligation to think about the residents of the town. According to Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai could easily understand his thoughts. In Mayor Wallace's view, the residents wanted to make money, so cutting back was definitely not possible. Americans also didn't know how to cut back. With their spending style, it was good enough that they didn't spend in advance. It was impossible to ask them to save money on clothing, food, housing, and transportation. If cutting back on income was not possible, then they could only increase their income. Originally, the main way of making money in the town was to sell some small things, open some small supermarkets, small restaurants, and so on. Most people mainly made money in two ways. One was the fishermen. After all, they lived by the sea. Some of these fishermen joined the ocean fishing companies in Boston, and some had their own boats. Usually, they would go around the high seas and catch some fish. The fishermen's income was originally very good. But in recent years, there were fewer and fewer fish. Although there was a fishing moratorium, the number of fish was inevitably decreasing. This and the fishermen's income were linked in a straight line. More and more people changed careers or went to Boston to make a living. If this continued, Winthrop might decline like Newfoundland before long. After all, without people, how could there be any development? Mayor Wallace's heart ached when he saw this scene. Therefore, he had been thinking of ways to make the town's residents live better all these years. They tried to raise their own fish fry, but the cost was too high, and the profits were very thin. Coupled with the indiscriminate catching of others, their plan went bankrupt not long after. Later, they also tried to recruit some people to build a building. Of course, it couldn't be a factory, but to be honest, although Winthrop wasn't far from Boston, it wasn't far. But why did she come to Winthrop instead of staying in Boston? Massachusetts was not California. Not every piece of land was valuable, so the plan went bankrupt before it could be implemented. Over the years, Mayor Wallace had tried many ways. Finally, he set his sights on the tourism industry. Of course, rather than saying that he was targeting the tourism industry, it was more accurate to say that the Massachusetts government was targeting the tourism industry. In fact, the current situation in Winthrop did not represent the state of Massachusetts, but the state's finances were not very good. At least, they wanted to make some extra money. That was why they focused on the tourism industry, but not the domestic tourism development in the United States. For Americans, there was nothing fun in Boston. If they wanted to have fun, the most fun place would be California. Airfares in the United States were much cheaper than expected, especially airfares to the metropolises. They could even be bought for a few dozen dollars when it was cheap. For Americans, it would be great to go there. There was Hollywood, Las Vegas, and if they wanted to see the cutting-edge industries, there was Silicon Valley. If they wanted to have fun, there were beaches. Why should they come to Boston? Even if they did not go to Los Angeles, they could go to places with sunshine, beaches, bikinis, or Miami. It was spring all year round. It was close to Orlando, the world's largest Disneyland, and it was cheaper. If you wanted to look for a pasture, you could go to Montana. The sky there was bluer, and the grasslands were greener. You could also go to Texas. That was the home of cowboys. You couldn't have water, grass, or mountains. Every tourist destination had to have a highlight. The United States had almost no history to speak of. Under such circumstances, Massachusetts really did not have any bright spots. It was rare to hear people say that they ended up in Boston. At least, this was the case in the United States. If they wanted to go to a big city, they could go to New York. Boston's attraction was not good. Even if Winthrop wanted to develop the tourism industry, their target was not the tourists in the United States. Their target was actually foreign tourists. European and Asian tourists were their main targets. Especially Asian tourists. For these tourists, they also have sunshine and beaches in their countries. But Boston, known as the best university in the United States, was still very attractive to them. It was precisely because of this that the Massachusetts government decided to develop this area. Through some domestic travel agencies, they would communicate with people from distant Asia who wanted to come here to play. They would conduct some activities to quickly apply for visas, or limited discounted development to attract more tourists here. It was precisely because of this news that Mayor Wallace went to find his brother. His brother was a middle-level leader in the Tourism Bureau. He was in charge of tourism. How could there not be a lucrative position? Therefore, Mayor Wallace specially invited them to come over and let them see if Winthrop had any hope of being integrated into Boston's tourism development. He hoped that they could help. It was precisely because of this that the guy named Hewlett was interested in Clive's plot. Hearing this, Jiang Hai also understood Mayor Wallace's intention. You mean, you want to be integrated into Boston's development plan? After thinking about it, Jiang Hai knocked on the table and asked. Yeah, but it doesn't seem possible now. Mayor Wallace nodded first, then shook his head. Is it because of me? Looking at him nodding and shaking his head, Jiang Hai asked with some doubts. No, it has nothing to do with you. In fact, I should have figured it out a long time ago. As I said just now, there are bright spots. We really don't have any bright spots here. Boston itself is one of the oldest cities in the United States. It has some historical frontiers. In addition, there are many teams there, which can attract sports. Cambridge and Newton have universities, which are also bright spots. Chelsea is a rich residential area, Quincy has a big market, and they are all good places to spend money. But here, sigh. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace immediately shook his head and then explained. The biggest feature of Winthrop is that it has a sea, but Boston also has one. There is a harbor and a free ship museum there. Unlike here, there is nothing. It is just a small broken dock. What is there to see? No matter where it is, if you want to attract people to come and play, you must have something special. But where does Winthrop come from? Something special. If there is no special feature, we can build it. Looking at the somewhat decadent Mayor Wallace in front of him, Jiang Hai chuckled. Build it? Hearing Jiang Hai's understatement, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but wonder. How can it be built? In this world, any problem that can be solved with money is not a problem. Our dock is small and can be expanded. Our streets are small and can also be expanded. There are no traditional features, but it doesn't mean that we can't create our own. First of all, they live by the sea. They can build a row of small villas and hotels by the sea, charge a certain fee, and rent them to guests who come to play. Our sea here is much cleaner than Boston's. It is a natural good bathing place. Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, the corners of Jiang Hai's mouth unconsciously opened. These Americans sometimes like to drill holes in their mouths. Winthrop is nothing special in their eyes, but in Jiang Hai's eyes, there are bright spots everywhere. Hearing Jiang Hai mention the first man-made feature, Mayor Wallace's eyes lit up. Looking at his appearance, Jiang Hai didn't stop, but continued, at the same time, we can also build a pier and get more cruise ships and the like. When we get up in the morning, we can also call a fisherman to take the tourists out to sea to fish. We don't need to go too far, nor do we need a very developed fishing boat. As long as we can catch something, we can charge them a certain fee and they can eat it directly on the boat. If there is a lot of fish, these people can buy it back and we can sell it to them very cheaply. But I think that no matter how cheap it is, it will still be more than the wholesale price, so the fishermen in our town should be able to increase a lot of income. This idea is very common in China, quite common. In some coastal areas, almost during the tourist season, there will be people from everywhere who will go fishing. The things they catch will be eaten for free on the boat. Of course, there will be some handling fees when boarding the boat. And many of these people will also buy the fish that they catch. As long as the price is slightly lower than the retail price on the market, these people will be very willing to take it back. This is also the psychology of people. The fish that they catch themselves will be more delicious than the fish that they buy. Also, our freshwater fish resources are very developed. We can set up some fishing spots in the small rivers in the town for the tourists to fish there. Of course, it also depends on the time and the time. I don't know about other places, but if we catch the fish here casually, it is hard to imagine in my country. These fish are extremely precious because they are all wild and are so big. It will attract a large number of middle-aged and elderly tourists from our country to stay here. If they want to stay here, they will need to rent our villas and eat in restaurants. Of course, if they don't want to eat in restaurants, our supermarkets can just import some Chinese sauces and things like that to promote consumption. Chapter 327. In addition, there are horse farms around our town. You can talk to them and ask them to build a simple track or something. You can invite people to come and play, and let them set the price according to their own wishes. Also, you can organize people to visit the nearby ranches. I don't want to visit mine, I have too many cows, and it will be very troublesome. However, you can let people visit some small family ranches. The cows that are killed on the spot can also be sold, or you can hold a barbecue party in the family ranches. These are all features, and they are all very fun places. Listening to Jiang Hai throwing out one feature after another, Mayor Wallace was stunned. He really didn't think that a town that had almost no features in his eyes would have so many business opportunities in Jiang Hai's eyes. Of course, this was not an original idea by Jiang Hai. He only thought of it after looking at the domestic tourism industry. In China, although it was not to the extent that a hill was a mountain, a ditch was a river, and a pool of urine was a hot spring, it was not too far off. Winthrop, although in the eyes of others, was a little boring, but in Jiang Hai's eyes, this place with good mountains and water, as long as the infrastructure was slightly improved, it would become the best tourist attraction. Why would it need any history or culture? The most important thing was to come here for leisure and relaxation. Is it really that easy? Looking at Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace drank up the coffee in front of him and asked with some doubts. Of course, we cannot sell to those tourists, but we can build a shooting range here and let them shoot. You know, our main target is Asian tourists, but guns are basically banned in Asia. They can't touch the real thing, but we can do it here. It will be a big income. Now, our gun shop costs about $1 for 5 bullets. When the time comes, we can give them $1 for 1 bullet, and they will be very happy. Seeing Mayor Wallace's eyes getting brighter and brighter, Jiang Hai became more and more excited. Sometimes, this was how ideas came about. $1 per shot. Oh my God, it's too dark. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Shenticlive couldn't help but cover his mouth. This isn't considered cheating. In my country, no matter how much money you spend, you won't be able to buy a gun. However, in order to avoid trouble, we need to install a lot of cameras, devices, security guards, and staff in the gun shop. But trust me, all this money can be earned back. He chuckled. For a big shot like him, he could touch a gun. Let alone 6 yuan, a bullet could even cost 10 yuan or 20 yuan. After all, this was something he had never experienced before in his life. After all, guns are a little dangerous, but if it's really like what you said, then it's really a big income. Didn't you say there are 2? What's the other specialty? Looking at Jiang Hai, Mayor Wallace narrowed his eyes and said slowly, Iroquois. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai said a word. Them? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but be confused. He subconsciously thought of the purpose of mentioning these people to Jiang Hai. Was it to capture these Native Americans for exhibition? Impossible, Jiang Hai wasn't that kind of bastard. Did he want to open up the Native American tribes for tours? This was also unlikely. How could the Native Americans like to let others enter their territory and be looked at like monkeys? This was naturally impossible. Mayor Wallace, who had made up his mind, couldn't help but feel a little confused. He didn't understand why Jiang Hai mentioned these people. Looking at Mayor Wallace's puzzled expression, Jiang Hai couldn't help but say with a smile, the specialty, the Iroquois handicrafts, the ginseng picked deep in the mountains. These are all very precious things. This is the specialty. If possible, hire a few Iroquois who are willing to come out to be hunters and guides and take tourists to the mountains to play. This is a big income. Of course, this is all in addition. But just the first 2 items, the handicrafts and the ginseng, are enough to make us a lot of money. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but clench his fists. Yes, why didn't he think of that? If it was just to sell some things, the Iroquois were still very willing to trade with outsiders, especially since he had some friendship with them. By then, they would have a better life and he would have a specialty. I have to admit that when those scientists said that the Wuxia people were the second smartest people in the world, I didn't quite believe it. Now it seems that saying that you are the second smartest people in the world is really unfair to you. Mayor Wallace let out a long breath and said with a gratified expression, I'll write down these things right away, and then we'll report it. These ideas are all yours. I don't think the state government will forget you. Based on my ideas, your future taxes will be reduced by at least 2%. While speaking, Mayor Wallace took out a small notebook and prepared to write down what Jiang Hai said and report it to the higher-ups. No, I think you've misunderstood. As soon as he heard that Mayor Wallace was going to report these ideas to the state government, Jiang Hai couldn't accept it. He immediately waved his hand to stop Mayor Wallace from writing. He didn't say so much just to benefit others. It was not an exaggeration to say that people like Jiang Hai wouldn't do anything without benefits. He said this because he wanted to do it. We don't need to give the state government more credit, do we? These things are all for our town, so this time, I think we should leave the state government behind and do it ourselves. Politics in the United States was like this. It was all separate. Other than some major issues, the country couldn't control the state couldn't control the city, and the city couldn't control the county. Although Winthrop was a county, it was an independent county. Other than some military, political power, and laws, it was an independent political system. It was not like China, where everything had to be reported. Here, as long as the mayor felt that it was okay and the people agreed, then it was okay. It was that simple. Now that he heard Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace was also a little tempted. Indeed, the state government could also do these things. If he reported it to the higher-ups, the state government might not implement these things in his town. He was afraid that when the time came, it would be for naught. Rather than that, it would be better for them to do it themselves. As long as they made a name for themselves, they could do anything. Even if the state government wanted to interfere, they would have to take their status into consideration. This was the reality in the United States. It really made Mayor Wallace tempted. But these things all need a lot of money. But after hesitating for a while, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but mutter. Like Jiang Hai said, whether it was building a house, repairing a shooting range, or opening an Indian shop, these all needed a lot of money. It was impossible for the town government, which couldn't even fork out $100,000 to repair the collapsed elementary school last winter, to come up with such a large sum of money. If they wanted to go to the bank for a loan, the bank might not even care about them. The town doesn't have it, but I do. The town has land, people, and money. We can cooperate. But I have to say first, the money I invest will definitely get shares and dividends. This is something that others can't get. Hearing Mayor Wallace's words, Jiang Hai smiled. He was waiting for him to say this. Why was Jiang Hai so considerate of the town? Money was the most important thing. What he said, Jiang Hai could participate in. He had more than $500 million in the bank. If he put it in the bank, it would only slowly decrease. Rather than that, it would be better to invest it in the industry. First, it wouldn't disappear. Second, there would be profits every year. Third, it was also because he now regarded Winthrop as his home. If this place became better, and the residents lived happier, then Jiang Hai would also have a lot of popularity and money. Killing 3 birds with 1 stone. What was there to hesitate about? This, I need to discuss with the people in town. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace now understood what Jiang Hai meant. The person who would benefit the most in the end would be Jiang Hai. He couldn't help but hesitate. But as Jiang Hai said, this was actually a win-win situation. He didn't think the people in town would object. Then I'll talk about what I'll invest in first. Let's talk about the Shore Villa Hotel. I'll pay for it, the town hall will pay for the land, and the people in town will pay for the manpower. In addition to wages, I want 70% of all the annual profits here. The rest will be divided between the town hall and the people, but I don't want management rights, I only want money. There's also the shooting range, which I can fully invest in, but I also want 70% of it. I also want to invest in the Indian Ocean, Jiang Hai said lightly, looking at Mayor Wallace in front of him. At this time, he was a businessman, a standard businessman. It was impossible to make him lose money. Of course, Mayor Wallace probably wouldn't agree to the shares he wanted. 70% was indeed a bit too much. Looking at Jiang Hai, Mayor Wallace raised 4 fingers and said seriously, if you fully invest in the construction, should give you shares, but 70% is too high, at most 40%. Of course, my lawyer will talk to you about this. You'd better have a meeting first and then give me a definite answer, because I don't know when I'll do something else with the funds here. If you miss this village, you won't have this opportunity. Looking at Mayor Wallace in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. 40% was definitely not enough. Asking for a sky-high price and paying on the spot, it was that simple. But he was not a professional, Moses Adams was. This lawyer, who specialized in corporate mergers and acquisitions, had been made to look like a person who specialized in criminal cases. But Jiang Hai didn't forget that he was a leader in this field. Although he had recently accepted his fate, Jiang Hai hadn't forgotten him. Now that Jiang Hai wanted to invest in this area, he was naturally the best candidate in this area. Chapter 328. Recently, after reading the book review section, everyone knew that it was not easy for Xiaofei to write a book. Therefore, most readers could understand why Xiaofei wanted to be cautious. Xiaofei was also very grateful for everyone's understanding and support. However, some friends might not know how to do it again. Xiaofei would like to explain here. Every day, Xiaofei would publish the first chapter of the 3 chapters to the public. At this time, it did not matter if everyone subscribed or not, because after publishing the 3 chapters here, Xiaofei would keep an eye on some pirated and banned websites. When the website was updated, Xiaofei would change the original content, with a time difference of 5 to 10 minutes. If everyone was using a computer to read it, then it would be very easy and they would be able to read it very quickly. If everyone was using a mobile phone to read it, it would also be automatically changed. If there were no changes, then they would have to download it again. If the download still did not work, then it might be a Chidian lag. If a long time had passed and there were no changes, then there was no point in downloading it again. Then they would have to delete the book from the phone's bookshelf and add it again, and they would be able to read it. The change time would take about 10 minutes or so I hope everyone can support me. Xiaofei would like to express his 1,200,000 points of apology. Xiaofei also needed to eat. Writing a book was not easy in the first place. Not only was he so tired that he was sick, his hair was also falling out. Now that Xiaofei was a full-time writer, he relied on this to survive. To be honest, the subscription fee was not much. A pack of cigarettes would not be a problem for him to read for a month. That little bit that leaked out from between the fingers of these big shots was Xiaofei's source of motivation to survive every month. Therefore, Xiaofei would like to sincerely thank everyone. I hope that everyone can understand the difficulties of full-time writers like us. Xiaofei was not a god. A book was worth hundreds of thousands, millions, and an IP was worth that much. Xiaofei was just a small flop, relying on this bit of royalties to survive. Therefore, I hope that everyone can help me out a lot. In the end, he could only apologize to everyone again. As long as everyone felt that this book was not bad, and there were people who supported Xiaofei, then Xiaofei would work hard to continue writing. He would definitely not disappoint everyone. Below is the content of chapter 333, which Xiaofei will share with everyone as a benefit. Chapter 333, Jiang Hai's Gift. Do you really want to invest in Winthrop? You have to know that this is not a small sum. It's not something that can be settled with just a few million. After following Jiang Hai out of Mayor Wallace's house, Clive looked at Jiang Hai and hesitated for a moment. She still felt that it was better to make things clear to him. She hoped that Jiang Hai would not act on impulse. Of course I know. After opening the passenger door for her and sending her in, Jiang Hai ran back to the driver's seat and sat in the driver's seat. Hearing Clive's words of concern, Jiang Hai smiled and said, "Why are you still doing this?" Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Clive frowned. Is Jiang Hai crazy? What you know is not the only thing I gained from my trip to Miami. Looking at Clive, Jiang Hai winked. Although he couldn't say it clearly, it was all thanks to Clive. What? How many girls did you get? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Clive couldn't help but chuckle and say with some reproach. Hearing Clive's words, Jiang Hai chuckled and said seriously, "How is that possible?" "But I got to know a rich man from the Middle East and made a fortune. This time, I can take out hundreds of millions of funds to develop our town." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Clive was stunned. He just said hundreds of millions. Oh my God, then you have to thank me properly. Knowing that Jiang Hai is not short of money now, Clive couldn't help exclaiming in a low voice, then looked at Jiang Hai with a proud face and said seriously, "Of course, this is no problem." Hearing Clive's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help laughing, then took out the gift he had prepared for Clive. When he went to school, he had already taken it out and wanted to give it to her at the school gate, but unfortunately, there was a fool there, so Jiang Hai didn't take it out. And when he was eating, he didn't find any opportunity, so now is a good opportunity. Really? Seeing Jiang Hai take out a box, Clive couldn't help but be a little surprised. After taking the box, she turned on the overhead lights of the car. Unlike Wuxia people who open their gifts behind their backs, Americans prefer to open their gifts in front of others, and Clive is naturally the same. Under Jiang Hai's encouraging gaze, she also opened the small box in front of her. As the box opened, a light blue platinum gem necklace appeared in front of her. Oh my God, this is the heart of the ocean? Looking at the gem in front of her, Clive was a little stunned. For Jiang Hai's generation, the Titanic was their favorite love story when they were young. Of course, Jiang Hai was an exception, because he didn't like to watch foreign movies, so even when he grew up, he only watched one part of the Titanic. What? Drawing? You guys are too vulgar. Jiang Hai likes to watch the part in the car. Of course not, that is a blue diamond, and it's worth a lot, but this isn't cheap either. This sapphire has been sleeping in the ocean for at least 400 years, and I found it by chance. I think it really suits you. Yes, how could this gem be the heart of the ocean? It was a blue diamond, and it was very expensive. Jiang Hai became rich because of this colored diamond. If such a large colored diamond was not worth hundreds of millions, it would be worth at least tens of millions. At least, before establishing a relationship with Chronicles, Jiang Hai wouldn't be willing to give such an expensive gift, but this gem was not cheap either. This gem was the best of the first batch of gems he took out from the ship. Back then, Phelps' men estimated that this gem was worth $300,000, but Jiang Hai didn't sell it. Later, when he was selling the gem, he asked Phelps' men to help him make a gem necklace similar to the heart of the ocean with platinum and diamonds. This gem necklace, excluding the $300,000 that Jiang Hai spent on the main material, cost him $50,000, just the diamonds and platinum at the back. It had to be known that $50,000 was more than 300,000 yuan, and the ring of diamonds around the gem was 1 carat. This thing was indeed expensive. Oh my God, it's too beautiful. These diamonds can't be real, right? This gift is too expensive. I can't accept it. Looking at the gem in front of her, Chronicles honestly liked it very much, very much, very much. However, she knew that the gift that Jiang Hai gave her must be very expensive, so expensive that she couldn't afford it. So no matter what, she couldn't easily accept it, especially when she and Jiang Hai didn't have that kind of relationship. Don't say that. I made money this time because of you. If I give you money directly, you definitely won't accept it. Jewelry is made for women to wear. What use would a man like me have for something like this? Hearing Chronicles' refusal, Jiang Hai immediately pushed the item back. When his hand touched Chronicles' hand, both of them couldn't help but tremble. Then, Jiang Hai took a deep breath and said calmly, "This is still too expensive." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Chronicles couldn't help but hesitate. "If you don't want it, then I'll throw it away. Let it return to the embrace of the sea." Seeing Chronicles' hesitation, Jiang Hai pretended to be angry and said to her. Sure enough, hearing Jiang Hai's words, Chronicles immediately took the gem necklace back. "No, it's too expensive." "Okay, I'll accept it. Don't give me such expensive gifts in the future. Although you are rich, but it's not good to be so extravagant." Looking at Jiang Hai, Chronicles' voice became softer and softer until Jiang Hai couldn't hear it anymore. "Just accept it. It was made for you. By the way, Delina and the others can speak now. Do you want them to go to school, or teach them again?" Hearing Chronicles' words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but ask her curiously. This matter really needed to be discussed with Chronicles. Well, I think we still need to listen to their opinions. This was a serious matter. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Chronicles' face became serious. After thinking for a while, she decided to listen to the two girls. Hearing Xanthi's words, Jiang Hai smiled and asked with a serious face, "Okay, tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, when you have time to come to my place, I will treat you to a meal and study it while we are at it." That might not be possible. Recently, in the school, 2 teachers in my grade are on vacation. One went back to give birth to a child, and the other's father had a car accident in Boston and broke a leg. She needs to take care of him, so I've been very busy recently. I need to memorize 3 classes of lessons, and I have to take a lot of classes. I really don't have much time. When Chronicles heard Jiang Hai's words, she couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed because what she said was true. She was indeed very busy recently. "Oh, that's it. Then forget it. Let's talk about it when you're not busy. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai made an oh sound. Thinking about it, not everyone was as idle as he was. He also remembered that he seemed to have to pick up Feng Yunshen and the others tomorrow. Although he didn't say that he would definitely have something to do with her, Jiang Hai always felt that a girl he had a good impression of met a girl who had done that kind of thing with him. It wasn't good for the two to be together. Well, after I'm busy for a month or so, I will definitely go there. Besides, it's useless to be anxious now, because if you want to go to school, you have to wait until school starts. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Clive also breathed a sigh of relief. Jiang Hai was so considerate, and she was really very happy. She immediately said to Jiang Hai with a smile. While the two were chatting, unknowingly, Jiang Hai's car had arrived downstairs of Clive's house. After watching her leave, Jiang Hai also drove back to his manor. As for Clive, she went back home happily. Because it was really a little late when she came back, so except for her sister, everyone else at home was asleep. Jiang Hai is back? Hearing the sound of her going upstairs, Cliff's door, which was opposite her room, was also opened. A small head popped out and looked at Sandy curiously. Yes. Hearing her sister's words, Clive, who was holding a large bouquet of roses and a box of gifts at this time, knew that she couldn't escape from her sister's words, so she directly admitted it. Hey. This big blockhead knows how to send flowers today. Surprisingly. In Cliff's eyes, Jiang Hai was a real blockhead. In fact, he was quite good in everything. He was easygoing, good-looking, tall and strong. Although they were not the same race, these were not a problem. The only problem was that he was really good at love. He clearly knew that her sister was interested in him, but he didn't win her over. This guy was really a blockhead. Hey, not only flowers, but also gifts. Okay, I'll go back first. Seeing the surprised look in her sister's eyes, Clive really liked her sister's expression that she couldn't see through Jiang Hai, so she deliberately waved the gift in her hand. Without showing it to Cliff, she directly turned around and ran back to her room, closed the door, and went to sleep. TSK, who cares? Seeing Clive's smug look, Cliff couldn't help but curl her lips. Although she was really curious about what Clive was holding, her self-esteem made her close the door and go back to sleep. While North America was in a state of sleep, in the afternoon of Wuxia, an international flight took off from the airport of the capital with a roar and flew to the other side of the ocean. Chapter 329. Dear passengers, we are here to solemnly remind you that New York's JFK Airport is about to arrive. Please put away the small table, turn on the sun visor, and straighten the back of the seat. Shuedkafu, the flight attendant's reminder in her ear woke Ai Xiaoxi, who was not sleeping too soundly, up from her state of sleep. After looking at her position with some confusion, she couldn't help but stretch and look at her watch. It was already past 2:00 in the middle of the night. Of course, this was the imperial capital time. She had been on the plane for more than 10 hours. Her waist and back were really sore. This was the first time she had been on a plane for such a long time. Looking at Feng Yunshen, who was still sleeping soundly with an eye mask beside her, Ai Xiaoxi hesitated for a moment and gently pushed her. Sister Chen, get up. Maybe she heard Ai Xiaoxi's voice. Feng Yunshen's body shook first, then she sat up straight, stretched, and then took off the eye mask. After looking around in confusion, she yawned. This plane ride is really tiring. She muttered in a low voice and pulled her head hard. Yeah. Hearing Feng Yunshen's words, Ai Xiaoxi couldn't help but respond. It was really too tiring. It's all your boss's fault. What kind of person is he? He said he wanted to come, but in the end, he only bought 2 economy class tickets. I don't need him to buy economy class tickets. Can't I come by myself? My waist. After stretching again, Feng Yunshan couldn't help but mutter with some annoyance. Now, the plane from the imperial capital to New York was actually very cheap. A direct flight was only 2,000 or 3,000 yuan. Although Feng Yunshan's income was not as much as that of a celebrity, no one particularly cared about 2,000 or 3,000 yuan now, right? Although it was a Boeing 777, this kind of big plane, the economy cabin position was not much different from an ordinary passenger plane. It was only half lying down. Only business cabins could lie down at 160 degrees. If you want to lie down completely, you have to buy a first-class cabin. Of course, when Jiang Hai was on the plane, he bought the most high-end first-class cabin. Not only did it have a seat, but it also had a bed. Of course, the price was not ordinary. Normally, the discounted economy class tickets would cost around 2,000 to 3,000 yuan. For business class tickets, this number would have to be multiplied by 5, which would cost around 14 to 15,000 yuan. Perhaps, it would have to be increased during busy times. For the first-class cabins, the price must be multiplied by at least 10 times. 30,000 RMB was considered the lowest price. For example, Jiang Hai's car usually cost at least 50,000 RMB. 50,000 RMB was enough to buy a good car in China. Therefore, it was no wonder that Feng Yunshan's boss was stingy. Even if it was business class, the two of them would have to pay 30,000 yuan for one trip and 60,000 yuan for one trip. In addition to the money for the equipment he originally got, and the money for publicity and printing posters, it would cost at least 100,000 yuan. Anyone would feel distressed just thinking about it. After all, not everyone was as rich as Jiang Hai. Sister Chen, you are always like this after sitting for a long time. I will help you rub it when we get off the plane. Looking at Feng Yunshan's appearance, Ai Xiaoxi put her hand on her waist and helped her to rub it. Feng Yunshan was still very satisfied with this flattery. By the way, Sister Chen, can you tell me about the man we are going to see later? Seeing that Feng Yunshan was in a good mood, Ai Xiaoxi asked her in a low voice. Oh, I will tell you. Maybe she was in a good mood, so Feng Yunshan did not introduce Jiang Hai's situation. The person we'll meet in a while is called Jiang Hai. He's my former classmate. As for his age, he's about the same age as me. You can call him Brother Jiang. His home is in Boston, but as for what he does specifically, he said that he raises cattle. I'm not very clear about the situation. Hearing Xiaoxi's words, Feng Yunshan said to her with 70% truth and 30% lies. If she really didn't understand what kind of tricks Jiang Hai had, she would be crazy to be with Jiang Hai. Oh, I see. Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, Ai Xiaoxi naturally did not believe all of it, but hearing her words, an image also appeared in her mind. The image of a dark-skinned, tall, and not handsome cowherd boy appeared in her mind. It was deeply rooted and could not be driven away. Just as she was thinking about how to deal with him these days, the plane had slowly landed at JFK Airport. There are 3 airports in New York, the most famous of which is naturally Kennedy Airport, located in Queens. Its throughput accounts for more than 30% of all routes in the United States. The second is Guarati Airport, located 13 kilometers east of Manhattan, in the northern part of Long Island. It is relatively small. This is an airport specially prepared by New York to deal with Wuxia passengers. It is dedicated to flying to Wuxia. Its passenger ratio is 5.8%, almost all of them flying to Wuxia. The other one is Newark Airport, but it is not so much for flying to New York as it is for flying to New Jersey, because this airport is located in New Jersey, not in New York. This time, Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi flew to Guarati. Fortunately, Jiang Hai checked the flights before, or they would have flown to JFK. When Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi came out with several large suitcases, it was already past 1:00 in the afternoon local time. When they just got off the plane, Feng Yunshan called Jiang Hai. After learning that Jiang Hai was in the parking lot, she carried her luggage and took Ai Xiaoxi to the parking lot. After entering the parking lot, Ai Xiaoxi was very nervous. After all, she was in a foreign country, and she was a little curious. Looking at the Zhang Hai, who meet her standards, she couldn't help but guess in her heart. Which one is he? But from the looks of it now, it doesn't seem to be any of them, because what she saw, Feng Yunchen saw, but obviously, Feng Yunchen ignored it. Although she only saw Zhang Hai, stayed with him for one night, she still recognized Zhang Hai's appearance. The two carried their luggage and walked like this, looking forward. After walking for about 10 minutes, Feng Yunchen, who was walking in front, couldn't help but brighten up and waved her hand. Seeing her appearance, Ai Xiaoxi knew that she had found her target. She immediately looked into the distance and found that at this time, a man was standing in the distance and waving to this side. She rubbed her eyes and looked at the man. It seemed, this man was completely different from what she imagined. This man looked very tall. She wasn't sure exactly how tall he was, but he was definitely taller than the people around him. Even Old Bai and Old Hay weren't as tall as him. At this moment, he was wearing a short-sleeved t-shirt, an outdoor shirt, and a pair of outdoor trousers. There were many pockets, and the t-shirt inside was faintly sticking to his muscles. Although she couldn't see clearly, Ai Xiaoxi was still a little surprised. He was wearing a pair of sunglasses on his not-so-handsome face. This image was completely different from the image of a cowherd boy in her imagination. As for what surprised her even more, at this time, there was a car parked next to this man. If she wasn't mistaken, it seemed to be a Rolls-Royce. And it wasn't a Rolls-Royce, but a very good brand. She didn't know what the specific name was, but this car was rare in the capital. Could it be that raising cattle in the United States is really so profitable? Hey, you're here. Just when she was puzzled, the two had already arrived next to Zhang Hai. Feng Yunchen, on the other side, pounced on Zhang Hai without saying a word, and then hugged Zhang Hai tightly, her face full of excitement and joy. This scene made Ai Xiaoxi confused again. What's going on? Hey, okay, there are outsiders. Feeling Feng Yunchen's enthusiasm, this made Zhang Hai a little overwhelmed. He opened his hands, carefully patted her back, and said to her, "Hey, Xiaoxi is not an outsider. This is my colleague, Ai Xiaoxi, and this is Zhang Hai. You can call him Brother Zhang." Hearing Zhang Hai's words, at this time, Feng Yunchen seemed to remember that she didn't come alone, so she took the initiative to jump down from Zhang Hai's body, naturally holding Zhang Hai's arm, and introduced her to Ai Xiaoxi behind her. "Hello, Brother Zhang, my name is Ai Xiaoxi." Hearing Feng Yunchen's words, Ai Xiaoxi immediately stood on her feet and respectfully reached out to Zhang Hai. The two shook hands lightly, and Zhang Hai took the initiative to let go. "Don't be nervous, I'm here for all of this. Have you had lunch? I'll take you to eat first, then do you want to play around in New York before going back, or go back directly?" Looking at Ai Xiaoxi's nervous look, Zhang Hai also smiled, but after saying a word to her, he looked at Feng Yunchen and asked her. It was said that it was a good thing to meet an old friend in a foreign land, not to mention that this old friend might have something to do with him, so Zhang Hai was indeed very enthusiastic about this unfamiliar Feng Yunchen. "We ate on the plane, so we're not hungry now. Besides, we have to take photos, so we need snacks for the next few days. Let's go back directly. Didn't you say that it would take 3 hours to drive back from here?" Hearing Zhang Hai's words, Feng Yunchen glanced at Ai Xiaoxi and found that she also had a tired look on her face, so she smiled and took the initiative to speak. "That's fine, let's come back when we have time. In fact, to be honest, there is really nothing to visit in New York. Coming here is just for fun. When I take you back in a while, let's walk around and see the attractions that we should see, then we can leave." Hearing Feng Yunchen's words, Zhang Hai also smiled, and then took the initiative to help the two girls put their luggage into the trunk. But when he put it in, Zhang Hai couldn't help but be a little surprised. These two girls are very powerful. The luggage is so heavy, how did they get it? He had to admit that Jiang Hai was still too naive. He somewhat underestimated the enthusiasm of Chinese men to please beautiful women. These big boxes, except for the time when they were pushed on the trolley, they hardly touched them. Chapter 330. Jiang Hai, is this your car? Sitting in Jiang Hai's Rolls-Royce, Feng Yunshan was still looking around. In fact, it was her first time sitting in such a car. The person behind her in China was nothing more than an entry-level luxury car, Bentley Speedster. She already thought that it was a top-level luxury car. Compared with Jiang Hai's Rolls-Royce Phantom Extended, it is indeed more than one grade worse. The most important thing is that Jiang Hai's car is still the best configuration. Sitting on the handmade calf leather seat, the feeling is really different. Although she doesn't like cars as much as men, she also knows that this car is about 7 or 8 million yuan in China. Yes, you are the first passengers of this car. I originally bought 3 pickup trucks, the big pickup truck of Ford, one F650 and 2 F750, but later I met a group of friends who went hunting in the mountains. They told me that what kind of car has what kind of function, like a sedan, it is used to pick people up, an off-road vehicle is used to go out and play, an MVP is used for family travel, and no matter how good a pickup truck is, it is just a pickup truck. I listened to him and bought other kinds of cars. Hearing Feng Yunshan's doubtful voice from behind, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. There is such a saying, are there any other cars in your house? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunshan couldn't help but laugh. Although she doesn't like cars, it doesn't prevent her from talking to Jiang Hai about what Jiang Hai likes. There is also a Ford E350, which is a business car, which can seat a lot of people, and a Braille Shield, which can also seat a lot of people, which is an off-road vehicle. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also replied. No sports car? Hearing this, Ai Xiaoxi, who has been sitting next to Feng Yunshan, couldn't help but interject. Compared with Feng Yunshan, Ai Xiaoxi knows less about cars. In her opinion, no matter how good a car is, it is not as good as a sports car. No. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai can't help but feel a little embarrassed. He really doesn't have a sports car. Oh. Hearing the awkwardness in Jiang Hai's words, Ai Xiaoxi couldn't help but smile brightly, as if she had said something wrong. You stupid girl, this car is much more expensive than the average sports car. When the time comes, we can also shoot a movie in this car. Jiang Hai shouldn't have any problems, right? Hearing Ai Xiaoxi's words, Feng Yunshan couldn't help but look at her and said happily. Whatever you like. Hearing what she said, Jiang Hai also smiled. He didn't care about these things. It was said that the car was a man's lover, but this point was actually indifferent to Jiang Hai. People who have a good relationship in China can borrow cars, let alone Jiang Hai. To be honest, his cars, except for his shield, he doesn't care much about the other cars. We live in Winthrop, which is half of the countryside. The road there is not very good, so we can't run with a sports car. We also need to raise the suspension, but if the suspension of a sports car is raised, it will be a little dangerous. When we run too fast, we may overturn if we are not careful, so I don't need that car. After agreeing to Feng Yunshan's request to borrow the car, Jiang Hai also explained to Ai Xiaoxi. Hearing Jiang Hai's explanation, Ai Xiaoxi couldn't help but stick out her tongue. Okay, get your phone ready, Statue of Liberty is here. Just when the atmosphere in the car was a little difficult to find a topic to talk about, Jiang Hai's voice also sounded in front, and Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi in the back also took out their mobile phones for the first time, and one of them looked outside seriously. As Jiang Hai said, in fact, in New York, there are not many scenic spots to see. If you just come to shop, then this is a paradise. Things are cheap and there is a wide variety, but if you come to travel and play, there are not many places to play here. The most famous scenic spot here is the statue of Goddess of Nature, but it is just a statue, what is there to see? Ground Zeroes is the site of 9/11. For Americans, it is a pain that can never be forgotten, but for people like Jiang Hai, it is the place where the incident happened, and what is there to see in a ruin? Broadway is a place where opera is performed. How many people can understand it? Wall Street is the financial center. Similarly, who can understand it? Central Park is a park, the United Nations headquarters is a building, and the Empire State Building is not the tallest. The New York train station is under Madison Square Garden. It may be interesting to watch basketball, but they won't go if they don't watch basketball. Times Square, if it is not New Year's Eve, there is really no meaning to go there. The only place to see is the art museum, but obviously, neither Ai Xiaoxi nor Feng Yunchen is interested in those things. After taking some photos happily, the three of them strolled around New York City again. In fact, for Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi, the best place to visit was actually Fifth Avenue, which was the luxury street. However, they were destined not to visit today. Fortunately, they have to take a flight from New York when they leave, so they can come back later. Jiang Hai didn't care. He simply strolled around New York City. It was already 2:00 in the afternoon. Jiang Hai drove directly, left New York, and went to Boston. After more than 10 hours of flight, it is impossible to say that the two girls are not tired. When they were in New York City, the car stopped and there was some scenery to see, so they couldn't fall asleep. However, less than 10 minutes after leaving the city, the two girls leaned against the car window, one on the left and one on the right. Although the scenery outside was good, they were not in the mood to look at it. Jiang Hai also noticed the situation of the two girls, so he took the initiative to close the car window and turned on the air conditioner. This time period is not much different from May in the north. The temperature is not high, nor is it low. In fact, it is quite comfortable to open the car window. There is no need to turn on the air conditioner, but Jiang Hai still turned on the air conditioner because he was afraid that the two girls would be uncomfortable. When they arrived at the rest stop in front of Boston, Jiang Hai woke the two girls up. After they went to the bathroom and rested for a while, the three of them set off again and returned to Jiang Hai's Winthrop Manor. "We are here." As the car got closer and closer, Jiang Hai also greeted the two girls who were still sleepy in the back. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two girls also forced themselves to sit up straight from their seats. Although the jet lag and fatigue were about to destroy them, they couldn't help but sigh when they looked at the scenery in front of them. At this time, although the night has not yet fallen, the sun has gradually set in the west. What greeted their eyes was a picturesque scene. The fiery clouds on the horizon were floating above the sky. Under the fiery clouds, they could only see the endless grassland in the distance. At the end of the grassland in the clouds, there was a faintly visible sea. Such a scene, coupled with a huge number of cows moving toward the cowshed, really gave their souls a heavy blow. So beautiful. Looking at the scene in front of her, Ai Xiaoxi muttered unconsciously. At this time, the deep-rooted image of a cowherd boy in her mind had collapsed at this time. It seems that Feng Yunchen is right, this Jiang Hai is very rich. Hearing her voice, Jiang Hai also smiled, then pressed the password at the door. The door opened, Jiang Hai also drove to the front of his villa. When the car stopped in the parking lot of the living area, Feng Yunchen and Ai Xiaoxi were even more surprised. Because at this time, in their eyes, Jiang Hai's cars were all parked in this parking lot. They had never heard of the War Shield, although it was not the biggest among them, it was the most conspicuous. The rough feeling of a soldier was really shocking. In addition to this car, the three pickup trucks in Jiang Hai's mouth also made them open their mouths in surprise. Although they don't know much about these cars, they have seen them before. For example, they are very popular in the country. The F-150, which was considered a good car, was like a baby in front of these three behemoths. Looking at these cars, they know that these cars are actually good cars, all of them are quite good cars. In addition to the cars, when they saw the well-located villa and Jiang Hai's big villa, their surprised expression was even more vivid on their faces. In fact, Feng Yunshan is also a little confused now. Because she only knows that Jiang Hai raises cattle in the United States and has some money, but she really didn't know that Jiang Hai actually has so much money. Too amazing. Ai Xiaoxi thought for a long time, but she still can't think of a way to describe her current mood and everything in front of her. She didn't know what to say other than, too amazing. Well, these days, you can see it whenever you want. It's getting dark, you must be hungry. I'll take you to your room first, then have dinner, and you can have a good rest. Hearing the surprised sigh of the two girls in front of him, Jiang Hai's vanity was greatly satisfied. After clapping his hands to attract the attention of the two girls, Jiang Hai said to the two girls while carrying the luggage. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the two girls also looked away with some embarrassment. But their eyes were full of curiosity when they looked at Jiang Hai. They really can't see it. Is Jiang Hai really so rich? Regardless of their gaze, Jiang Hai carried those things and walked into his house. But as soon as the door opened, Xiao Huang, Xiao Bai, Qiuqiu, and Dai Teeth had already rushed out. Seeing Jiang Hai carrying things, they took the initiative to come over. These are not for you, get out of the way. Jiang Hai said with a smile as he kicked the four little guys around him. At this time, Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi also walked into the room. The moment they walked in, the four guys over there looked at them for the first time, and when they saw these animals, they couldn't help but be shocked. Chapter 331. These are. When they walked in, the four pets, who were still playing around, fixed their gazes on the two women almost instantly. Dai Fang was fine, and the snow squirrel, who was originally very cute, was also very cute when it tilted its head and looked at them. However, Qiuqiu, Lil Yellow, and Lil White, who had already matured, were not so friendly. Goldie's wolf-like eyes stared at them indifferently, causing goosebumps to appear all over their bodies. Although Xiao Bai did not have wolf-like eyes, its huge body looked very intimidating just by standing there. As for Qiuqiu, it was like a wild beast. The way it looked at the two ladies made it seem like it was treating them as food. Feeling the gazes of these beasts and birds of prey, the two of them could not help but stop in their tracks. Don't scare the guests. Don't worry, these are my pets. They won't take the initiative to attack people. Seeing that the two girls seemed to be very scared, Jiang Hai also kicked these guys. Under Jiang Hai's foot, these guys changed very quickly. Goldie was used to being cold, so it just glanced at them and turned to leave. Xiao Bai, Dai Fang, and Chirpy were much more despicable. The three little guys skipped in front of the two girls and sniffed with their noses. However, other than Dai Fang, the two girls had no immunity to these things. Okay, go play by yourself. Seeing that the two of them were so scared that they did not dare to move, Jiang Hai put down his luggage and walked over. After driving these guys away, he took the two of them upstairs. In the past, I only heard that those rich people raised ferocious beasts. I didn't quite believe it, but now it seems that I was too naive. Behind Jiang Hai, Feng Yunshan said with a smile. In the past, there were a lot of news about this kind of thing, but they just read it with a joking attitude. Now that they saw it, they were also a little scared. Actually, they are not ferocious beasts. The first one to leave is Goldie, a Tibetan Mastiff. The black one is Xiao Bai, a Caucasian dog. They are all pet dogs. Dai Fang is a snow squirrel. I picked it up in the forest of this manner. As for Chirpy, it is indeed a bird of prey. It is the national bird of the United States, the bald eagle, but it is not an adult yet. Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, Jiang Hai also explained with a smile. Although they knew that those two guys were dogs, Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi still felt a little scared. They followed Jiang Hai all the way to the second floor and breathed a sigh of relief, but before they could completely relax, they saw a door not far from them open, and the figures of Delina and Marian also emerged from there. Hey, Jiang Hai, you are back. Looking at Jiang Hai and the two women, the two girls were a little surprised. Just now, Jiang Hai did tell them that he was going to pick someone up, but he didn't say that he was going to pick up women. Oh, you are back. Come, let me introduce you. These two are the two who will stay with us for a few days from today, aunties? This is my high school classmate, Feng Yunshin, this is Ai Xiaoxi, and these two are my daughters, Delina and Marian. Seeing them come out, after all, they are going to live under the same roof, so Jiang Hai also introduced them with a smile. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, the two women's faces were a little embarrassed. First, because of the title of auntie, they always thought that they were very young, okay? Feng Yunshin may be worthy of this title, after all, she is the same age as Jiang Hai. But Ai Xiaoxi was actually born in 1994. She was only 22 years old this year. At this time, Delina and Marian, who were already 15 years old, called them aunties. How depressed are they? In fact, this time they didn't know that Jiang Hai had two daughters this old. Kissing was definitely impossible, so the only possibility was that they did it, or was it recognized? But in any case, they are also two daughters, and it seems that they didn't bring any gifts. Hello, just call us by our names. Calling us aunties makes us sound old. You are so cute. As expected of a veteran who has been in society for so many years. When Ai Xiaoxi was still a little confused, Feng Yunshin had already reacted. She smiled and walked forward first. After shaking hands with the two girls, she introduced herself. Looking at the appearance of Feng Yunshin and Ai Xiaoxi, Delina and Marian looked at each other. They were very sure that these two women must have a relationship with Jiang Hai. It was very likely that it was a relationship between a man and a woman. This was also a woman's intuition. Okay, you can play by yourselves first, I will take them to the room. Seeing that the relationship between the four women was a little subtle, Jiang Hai hurriedly said to break the deadlock. After saying something to Delina and Marian, Jiang Hai took the luggage to the depths of the second floor, where he had already prepared two rooms. You can live here. These two rooms have independent bathrooms and small living rooms. After coming to the front of the room, Jiang Hai also opened the door of the room and introduced it to them with a smile. For his room here, Jiang Hai was very satisfied. Wow, it's quite good. The two women looked at the layout of the room and couldn't help but exclaim softly. Indeed, the layout of the room was beyond their imagination. Originally, the two of them were prepared to suffer, but they didn't expect that Jiang Hai was really a rich man. The room he arranged for them was also quite luxurious. This room was not worse than a business suite in a 5-star hotel. It was just that there was only one room. The whole room had a quite luxurious layout. There was an independent air conditioner, TV, living room, bathroom, solid wood floor, plus a big bed. Everything was a bit beyond their expectations. Forget about the two rooms. When we leave, you'll have to tidy it up. I think this bed can fit 3 to 5 people. Let's share a room with the two of us. It'll be easier for us to talk at night. Looking at Ai Xiaoxi, who was already a little shocked, Feng Yunshin immediately said. In fact, it was not that she really had a good relationship with Ai Xiaoxi, nor that she really liked to sleep with others, but because she still had some things to discuss with Ai Xiaoxi. Oh. Then it's up to you. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment. Is there anyone in this world who doesn't like to sleep alone? Jiang Hai didn't know, but since they said so, Jiang Hai won't care. If you can't sleep well, you can also sleep in the guest room next door. Only me, Daliana, and Marian live here, but I have more than a dozen rooms here. There is enough space. Smiling at the two, Jiang Hai explained. Well, you have been on the plane for more than 10 hours, plus more than 4 hours in the car, you are probably tired. I will go down to prepare food now. You can rest and come down to eat. After eating, you can sleep well. Looking at the two people in front of him, Jiang Hai also said with a smile, then left the room. The moment Jiang Hai left the room, Ai Xiaoxi couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief and looked at Feng Yunchen with some complaints. Sister Chen, you didn't say that your classmate is a rich man. Looking at Feng Yunchen, Ai Xiaoxi said helplessly. Didn't I say? Well, in fact, I didn't know he was a rich man. Shrugging, Feng Yunchen smiled self-deprecatingly. Although she had an unforgettable night with Jiang Hai, she only saw Jiang Hai's watch. Looking at Jiang Hai's residence in China, it is hard to imagine that he is a rich man, so in her opinion, Jiang Hai is estimated to be a farmer with a few tens of millions of yuan in the United States, that's all. But at this time, when she came over to take a look, she had to sigh. It seems that Qi Li is indeed not blind. This Jiang Hai is a bit interesting. For the first time, the idea of relying on Jiang Hai appeared in her mind. Maybe this is a good choice. This villa, this grassland, did he say that he has a forest? By the way, there is also a sea god, I thought. Listening to Feng Yunchen's unreliable laughter, Ai Xiaoxi couldn't help but sit on the sofa and said helplessly. Thought? What did you think? I thought he was a poor boy. Okay, little girl, don't be silly, get up quickly, open the box and take out the clothes. Glancing at Ai Xiaoxi, Feng Yunchen couldn't help but stand up and began to open their big box. What are you going to do with the clothes? Although a little curious, Ai Xiaoxi still stood up and helped Feng Yunchen. Pick 2 good-looking clothes and give them to his 2 daughters. I didn't know that he had a mistress in the United States, but since we are here, since they call us aunties, this gift is indispensable. Glancing at Ai Xiaoxi, Feng Yunchen also said with some helplessness. After listening to her words, Ai Xiaoxi was even more bored. She is only 22 years old, and she is already an auntie. It would be fine if the other party is a little child. But the other party doesn't seem to be much younger than her. It is indeed a bit of a loss to be an auntie so inexplicably. But as Feng Yunchen said, whether she accepts it or not, this matter exists, so she can only give things. After opening the big boxes, countless clothes appeared in their line of sight in an instant. These clothes are all theirs, but they are not for them to wear, but for shooting. They came here this time to shoot a photo shoot. Naturally, it is impossible to only wear 1 or 2 sets for the photo shoot. Naturally, they have to shoot a lot of sets. These clothes also have to be brought over. Looking at these clothes, they are a little tangled. It is not that the clothes are bad. The clothes here are not bad, whether it is the quality or the price. Many of them are new, but these clothes are too sexy to give to a 15 or 16-year-old girl. Chapter 332. Some words were written in front by Xiao Fei. Actually, Xiao Fei did not want to guard against such things. Xiao Fei was also very tired. Wouldn't it be better to just send it directly? Xiao Fei could save himself the trouble. This was because if he did not guard against it, Xiao Fei might really starve to death. Xiao Fei had entered the industry early. But before that, he had gone out to work. He had installed computers for others at the computer city, and had also installed systems in other people's homes. Since 2010, when he took control of the ball, he had started working full-time. To be honest, he had indeed earned some money in those few years. It had also given Xiao Fei the desire to continue. The best book, Taking Control of the Ball, had an average subscription of 2,888. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a high-quality book. But ever since the 3 years of turmoil in the online literature industry, competitive novels had started to decline. Xiao Fei had no choice. Xiao Fei had to eat, so he chose to change his genre. But the path of changing genres was very difficult. Xiao Fei had thought about this a long time ago. What was valuable was perseverance. If he continued to stay there, he might not have a future. Then he could only take the risk and go out to explore. Xiao Fei had written 2 urban novels in 2 years. This was the second one. Perhaps the structure of the story had not been recognized by everyone. But people improved slowly. Xiao Fei also believed that he still had some room for improvement. But the prerequisite was that Xiao Fei did not starve to death. Only then could he continue. Everyone's subscription earned Xiao Fei 2 cents for every 1,000 words. One of the cents was from the website that had just been opened a few years ago. A chapter of 3,000 words was 1 subscription. Xiao Fei earned 6 cents, and there was still the addition of coins. Originally, the average subscription of this book was about 700. On a good day, Xiao Fei would publish 3 chapters, and there would be about 2,000 new subscriptions every day. 1 subscription cost 6 cents, which was 120 yuan. But most of the time, on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, there would only be about 1,000 new subscriptions, which was 60 yuan. Xiao Fei was not afraid of being laughed at. Xiao Fei's January royalties were 2,200 yuan, and there was still a tax deduction. It was said to be 20%, but it was actually 11%. There was still more than 200 yuan to be deducted. Xiao Fei really had no choice but to earn less than 2,000 yuan a month. Now that he was on guard, based on the current growth rate, he could earn more than 3,000 a month. Not to mention other things, it was enough for Xiao Fei to eat. Xiao Fei really didn't want everyone to go through so much trouble. He still had to delete the bookshelves and wait for the next update. But let's put ourselves in their shoes. As long as Xiao Fei was still able to get by, Xiao Fei wouldn't be able to guard against this thing. Xiao Fei was only like this because he had no other choice. Therefore, even though he was extremely apologetic to everyone, Xiao Fei still had to shamelessly guard against it. In the end, Xiao Fei could only ask for everyone's understanding. Writing a novel was not easy, so Xiao Fei could only treasure it. He begged everyone. Chapter 333. Hey, you guys are here. Come and have a seat, it's time for dinner. Listening to the sound of footsteps, Jiang Hai also looked up at the stairs and found Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi slowly walking down the stairs. It could be seen that after such a short rest, the 2 girls were indeed a lot more energetic. Their originally pale faces had also become healthy at this time. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the 2 also looked at each other and quickly walked to the table. As soon as they sat down, Daliana and Marian walked out of the kitchen with food in their hands. After all, it wasn't a formal reception, so Jiang Hai didn't ask Mrs. Philemon to come over to help. Instead, he made the food himself. However, although he made it himself, the food was all good. Jiang Hai made a total of 6 dishes today. Fried steak and lobster were inevitable. Fried steak was a must here. Although lobster wasn't very popular here, at least it couldn't be compared to beef, but in China, it was the best food. Fried fish strips were also a must. There was also a large plate of boiled crabs and shrimps, a plate of scallion fried sea cucumber, and a large plate of vegetable salad. These were the dishes for tonight. Although there was more meat than vegetables, except for beef, the other fats weren't too high. Besides, they were all raised by him, so the taste was naturally better. Hey, hello, we're here to help. We came in a hurry this time, so here are the gifts I prepared for you. Looking at Delina and Marian, Feng Yunshan chuckled as she motioned Ai Xiaoxi to help her. At the same time, she and Ai Xiaoxi picked out 2 pieces of clothes that were not that sexy. Both clothes were new, and they hadn't worn them before. They were specially bought for this shoot. It was not expensive, only 200 to 300 RMB, but it was also a token of their sincerity. Thank you. After receiving the clothes from Feng Yunshan's hands, the 2 girls were stunned for a moment. Fortunately, they didn't stay in a daze for too long. Daliana spoke first. Hearing Daliana's words, Marian also nodded to express her gratitude. You're welcome. Hey, Xiaoxi, let's go and help. Hearing the words of the two girls, Feng Yunshan stood up with a smile, but just as she was about to go to the kitchen to help, she found that Ai Xiaoxi, who had been called to help, was still standing there, which made her a little unhappy. Does she still think this is her own home? He didn't have any foresight at all. Sis Chen, this is a lobster, right? But after hearing Feng Yunshan's words, Ai Xiaoxi didn't immediately help. Instead, she stuttered. Hearing her words, Feng Yunshan couldn't help but frown. Has she never seen food before? What was so surprising about lobsters? In their line of work, there were plenty of dinners and drinking parties. Lobsters were a common occurrence. However, just as she was about to turn around and reprimand Ai Xiaoxi, her eyes unconsciously widened. Because at this moment, the lobsters in front of them were indeed a little out of common sense. Is this a lobster? Oh, it's a little big. Looking at the lobster lying on the grill, from head to tail, excluding the pincers, it was about 80 centimeters long. They subconsciously swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said in disbelief. In China, a 2-foot-long lobster costs more than 1,000 yuan. This is a consensus, whether it's an Australian lobster or a Boston lobster. A lobster is a lobster. Although it's the patent of the nouveau riche, after all, people without money can't afford it. And the bigger the lobster, the more valuable it is. This is also inevitable. Jianghai's lobster, if sold in China, would cost less than 50 to 60,000 yuan, let alone eating it. You might not even be allowed to look at it. In a seafood restaurant, lobsters of this level would be treated as the treasure of the restaurant. Jianghai's lobster, from the tail to the tip of the pincers, is 87.2 centimeters long, weighing a total of 14.8 kilograms. A 30-pound lobster, according to the market price of 100 yuan, is worth more than 3,000 yuan. Not to mention, it's so big and so heavy. Looking at this lobster, even Feng Yunshan was a little stunned. This was a toy. Even if it was a first-class round-trip ticket, it could also be exchanged for half a car, and it would be the kind that cost more than 100,000 yuan. This is our own lobster, Jiang Hai specially asked Uncle Anderson to get it today. It's so big, and we don't have a lot of them here, so we still need to pick one. It looks like it's bigger than the last time when Jiang Hai's other friend came. Seeing Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi's stunned expression, Daliana also said with a smile. Although she still has her guard up against these two women who gave her gifts, it doesn't matter if she explains it to them. Do you often eat this kind of lobster here? Hearing Daliana's words, Ai Xiaoxi seemed to react. She pointed at the lobster in disbelief and asked Daliana. Of course, Jiang Hai liked to eat lobsters for a while. He ate them almost every day. Basically, they are about the same size as this one. Some are bigger than this one, and some are smaller than this one. He doesn't eat small ones. Hearing Ai Xiaoxi's stunned words, Marian also said in a charming voice. Hearing these two girls' words, Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan glanced at each other, thinking, what a waste. Cough, lobster, let's eat it in a while. Let's go help them. Smiling awkwardly, the two walked into the kitchen with their heads lowered. As soon as they walked in, they smelled the aroma of the steak that Jiang Hai was frying. Hey! You're here, just in time to serve the dishes. The steak can be eaten after frying it. Seeing them walking in, Jiang Hai was a little surprised. But thinking of the customs in China, when they come to the host's house as guests, as women, they naturally have to come and help. Jiang Hai didn't care about it. He pointed to the already prepared salad, fried fish sticks, boiled crab and prawns, and prepared sea cucumber with scallion on the table. Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi subconsciously swallowed a mouthful of saliva. No need to be so troublesome, just a home-cooked meal will do. This is really too lousy. After hesitating for a while, Ai Xiaoxi whispered to Jiang Hai. Except for that big lobster, the price of these things is definitely not low in China. Hey, what do you mean by lousy? These things are produced in my manner. We usually eat them like this. You came a little early. If you come at this time next year, my manor also has home-brewed red wine. I think the taste will be very good. Hearing Ai Xiaoxi's words, Jiang Hai also waved his hand casually. These things are indeed just home-cooked dishes. Well, let's take them out. Seeing that Jiang Hai really didn't care, Feng Yunshan also gestured to Ai Xiaoxi. The two walked out with 2 plates of dishes. After putting them down, they came back with 2 plates. As for Delina and Marian, they went back to put their clothes. To be honest, at this age, especially the precocious Delina and Marian, they were actually very interested in these little sexy clothes in their hearts. It's just that Jiang Hai didn't let them buy or wear it. They were also helpless about this. As for Shite Clive, it was even more impossible. Come on, let's eat. Finally, holding a basket of bread and a basket of fried steak, Jiang Hai walked out of the kitchen. Delina and Marian had also come down at this time, and they set up knives, forks, and tableware for the 5 seats. The 5 people sat down and were ready to eat, but Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan hesitated for a long time with the knives and forks in their hands. They didn't know which one to start with, because these things in front of them, to be honest, were really fun. Let's eat this first. After hesitating for a while, they decided to eat the lobsters first. Although the lobsters in Jiang Hai's place are just ordinary Arctic lobsters, the spotted lobsters and bamboo lobsters he bought haven't grown up yet. Although after a few months of growth, these lobsters are much heavier than the ordinary lobsters raised for 180 days. Almost each of them weighs nearly 1 or 2 grams, but they haven't grown up yet. Jiang Hai raised these lobsters because he expects them to produce seeds here, so he won't catch them so easily. But even the Arctic lobsters, which are not valuable in China, have undergone obvious changes after being raised by Jiang Hai with seaweed promoted by spiritual energy for so long. One of them is that they have become bigger. Generally speaking, because the Arctic lobsters are 150 meters below sea level, their growth rate is very slow, and their meat is very tight. They were small in size too. A prawn weighed about 8 to 10 grams, and this was considered a big prawn, not a small one. The Arctic lobsters Jiang Hai originally caught are about the same size, about 40 to 50 per catty. But since Jiang Hai began to shift his focus to the sea, the weight of the Arctic lobsters Jiang Hai caught has also increased rapidly. Now, a lobster is not smaller than an ordinary big green lobster. Almost each of them weighs about half a kilogram, which is about 25 grams. It has to be admitted that such low-end creatures need much less spiritual energy to break through the limit. It's not that such big Arctic lobsters don't exist in this world, but even if there are, the price is not ordinary. While peeling the lobsters, Feng Yunshan is guessing what kind of lobster this is. She has eaten Arctic lobsters before, but this lobster doesn't look like it. Until she finished peeling and put the lobster into her mouth, her eyes subconsciously narrowed. The firm texture of the Arctic lobsters, coupled with the special sweetness of the deep-sea creatures, instantly hit her stomach. It made her feel uncomfortable. On the other side, Ai Xiaoxi is feeling even worse now. Because she ate a crab. Jiang Hai raised king crabs, but they are not ready to be eaten yet. What they caught now were Portunus crabs, but they were quite large. Each of these Portunus crabs weighed close to a catty. Such large Portunus crabs were sold for 100 yuan per catty in China, and that was under the off-season. Chapter 334. If it was around November, people would charge you 120 renminbi per catty for such fat swimming crabs. It was like Bing City, where the cost of living was not high, and it was not far from the sea. Jiang Hai heard from one of his friends in Sichuan that the live prawns sold there were not only small prawns, but also ordinary prawns. They were very small, but they were sold for nearly 100 renminbi per catty. In the past 2 years, it was cheaper, but it was still more than 80 renminbi per catty. Eating crabs in such a place, it was really not something that ordinary people could afford. Although things in the sea were expensive, things in the river, such as crayfish, were very cheap. Ai Xiaoxi's home was not in Sichuan, so she often ate seafood, but this was the first time she ate such delicious crabs. This taste, it's great. When the two recovered from the shock, they couldn't help but look at each other. Ai Xiaoxi also whispered, but although her voice was not loud, Jiang Hai still heard it clearly. If you think it's delicious, eat more. This lobster is not bad, and the sea cucumber is very big. Yes, and the most important thing is this beef. This is actually the most expensive and valuable thing on this table. Looking at Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi, Jiang Hai smiled and introduced them. When they heard Jiang Hai's words, they stopped eating. You mean, this beef is valuable? How valuable can it be? More valuable than the lobster? Feng Yunshan curiously forked a piece of beef and cut it first. She had to admit that Jiang Hai's beef felt good. Although the table knife was not sharp, it cut all the tendons in the beef in an instant. The cut was neat. Although it was fully cooked, the skin of the beef was blackened, and there was fresh red meat inside. If there was no blood flowing down, she might have thought that it was not cooked at all. Looking at this piece of beef, Feng Yunshan stuffed it into her mouth. To be honest, she did not believe that beef would be more expensive than lobster. But the moment the beef was stuffed into her mouth, the fragrance of the beef rushed directly into her mind. She subconsciously took a bite, and the delicious gravy that was tightly held in the beef seemed to explode, rushing into her mouth. The chewy feeling made her unconsciously move her jaw to make herself chew faster. At this moment, Feng Yunshan felt as if his soul had floated to another world. There were blue skies, white clouds, and green grasslands. On the grasslands, there were lively cows looking for food and chasing each other. This was the power of nature. Just as she was immersed in such thoughts and unable to extricate herself, she felt her body being pushed. Only then did she extricate herself from that feeling and look blankly to her side. Sister Chen? Sister Chen? Looking at Feng Yunshan's dumbfounded expression, Xiaoxi couldn't help but panic a little. She couldn't help but gently nudge her. Seeing that she had woken up, she couldn't help but look at her awkwardly. This beef is amazing. But at this time, Feng Yunshan did not have the leisure and time to pay attention to Ai Xiaoxi. Instead, she turned her head directly and looked at Jiang Hai. She cut a piece of beef and stuffed it into her mouth while speaking hurriedly. Of course, if I sell this beef, I will sell it for about $400 per pound. Lobster is only a few dollars. Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, Jiang Hai also smiled. He is quite confident in his beef. Now, he has confidence in the beef, but soon, he will also have confidence in the fish. $400 per pound? $400 is equal to 2,600 renminbi. 1 pound is about 9 taels. Oh my god, you want to sell a pound of beef for 3,000 renminbi? On the other side, Ai Xiaoxi, who has not eaten yet, originally wanted to try it after listening to Feng Yunshan's words, but after hearing Jiang Hai's words, her hand that was about to put the beef into her mouth trembled unconsciously. It's okay, eat as much as you want, look at how scared you are. Seeing her reaction, Jiang Hai was very satisfied. After hearing Jiang Hai's words, Ai Xiaoxi still had some doubts in her heart, but since she is already here, it would be a pity if she didn't try it. So after hesitating for a while, she decided to eat it. Anyway, it won't kill her. When she took a bite, she instantly felt that the first half of her life was really wasted. At least in terms of food. Looking at Jiang Hai, who she thought was a cowherd, Ai Xiaoxi suddenly wanted to cry. A pound of beef can be sold for almost as much as a student who just graduated from school. What's the use of going to school with a month's salary? What's the use of going through hardships in society? Look at Jiang Hai, it's so easy. He eats lobster and beef every day, and the money he earns is equivalent to what other people earn in several lifetimes. This kind of satisfaction almost makes her excited, okay? Looking at Jiang Hai and thinking about herself, Ai Xiaoxi suddenly had the urge to cry. But fortunately, she forced herself to endure it, but her mood was depressed for no reason. But no matter how depressed her mood is, it can't stop her from eating, because she doesn't know if she will have a chance to eat these things again in the future. Seeing that she stopped talking, Feng Yunshan also sped up her eating pace. She was simply afraid that there would not be enough to eat. However, it was obvious that she was thinking too much and overestimating herself. Jiang Hai made 10 pounds of beef, a total of 20 pieces. They couldn't finish the beef alone, plus 30 pounds of lobsters, crabs, Arctic shrimp, and sea cucumbers. Naturally, they couldn't finish the rest. As for the rest, Jiang Hai basically fed it to the dogs. Well, rich people can be so capricious. After about an hour or so, Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi really can't eat anymore, and they both lay on the chair without any image. Jiang Hai, I have never envied others in my life, because others are others. Life is given by God, it's not something you can fight for. So I have always believed that I can live a better life with my own efforts. I don't have any ambition, but now I suddenly envy Qili. If I were the one who married you, would I be able to enjoy such delicious food every day? How can I eat when I go back in the future? Touching her stomach, Feng Yunshan said to Jiang Hai weakly while panting. Then stay, you can eat as much as you want. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai didn't care. After getting up, he tidied up and poured the remaining dishes into the basin next to him. This is the dinner for little Huang and Xiao Bai. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Jiang Hai, Daliana, and Marian didn't do anything, but Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi on the other side couldn't help but tremble. Ai Xiaoxi looked at Feng Yunshan with envy and jealousy. Feng Yunshan has such a big boss behind her, he has so much money, looks good, and can eat so much delicious food every day. Feng Yunshan is going to be rich. But Feng Yunshan's face flashed with a trace of surprise, and also a trace of a bitter smile. If we were in junior high school, I would definitely agree. Looking at Jiang Hai, Feng Yunshan laughed at herself and said firmly. With your junior high school appearance, I don't like you. Let's not talk about it. You guys can move around first, you can also watch TV over there. After digestion, go upstairs and rest. You guys are quite tired. Looking at Feng Yunshan, Jiang Hai laughed jokingly, then walked into the kitchen with the cleaned plates and basins. Jiang Hai's dishwasher here is also the most advanced. It doesn't need people to use their hands. People only need to pour the leftovers in the plates and then put the plates in. This machine will wash the plates and bowls according to the size and shape, disinfect them, then dry them, and finally put them in the connected cupboard. Everything is automated, and there is no need for people to do anything. It is precisely because they saw Jiang Hai's fully automated machine that Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi didn't propose to help, because there is really nothing to help. But when Jiang Hai came out, they went upstairs directly. It's not that they don't want to watch TV or anything, but because the TV here is naturally in English, they can't understand it very well. Their English is limited to communicating with others. Although they have all gone to university and passed CET 4 and CET 6, they are still far from being able to communicate with foreigners normally. The reason why they can communicate with Delina and Marian is that they speak Wuxia language. Jiang Hai's usual education is not a joke. Back in the room, the two took a shower one after another. After washing their hair, they lay on the big bed without any image. Looking at the woman beside her who is much older than her, Ai Xiaoxi hesitated and said, Sister Chen, you should like Jiang Hai, right? Why didn't you agree when Jiang Hai said that you can stay? Hearing Ai Xiaoxi's words, Feng Yunshan, who was still swiping her phone and preparing to upload the photos she took tonight, couldn't help but stop for a moment. Then, as if nothing happened, she continued to swipe her phone. You are still too young. Let me ask you, is Jiang Hai good? Without looking at AI Xiaoxi, Feng Yunshan asked alone. She's rich and not ugly. She's tall and has a good figure. She seems to have a good personality too. Most importantly, she doesn't need to socialize much. She's also very kind. The food here is so good. I feel very good. Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, AI Xiaoxi couldn't help but recall the impression Jiang Hai gave her today. If the full score is 100, this is already 99. One less point is afraid that Jiang Hai will be proud. Of course, if Jiang Hai is shockingly handsome, then 100 points is also possible. You can think of it, but I can't think of it. But have you considered it? Will such a man lack women? Putting down the phone, Feng Yunshan looked at AI Xiaoxi and said very seriously. Hearing her words, AI Xiaoxi also closed her mouth. Just like Feng Yunshan said, such a man will not lack women. Chapter 335. Hee, maybe you're saying that I'm pretending. You've been in the company for a long time. You should have heard the rumors about me. Hearing AI Xiaoxi's silence, Feng Yunshan laughed at herself, then turned sideways and looked at AI Xiaoxi beside her. Now that we're fated to sleep in the same bed, I'll tell you. I have a man behind me, but I'm that man's mistress. A few years ago, that man might have come to find me, but in recent years, he hasn't come to find me except for giving me money every month. Maybe you'll think that it's better to find someone like Jiang Hai to be a mistress than to be like this. Looking at AI Xiaoxi, Feng Yunshan didn't seem to care whether she heard it or not. She just kept talking. She seemed to lack someone to talk to. Without giving AI Xiaoxi a chance to speak, Feng Yunshan continued, yes, it's really good to be Jiang Hai's mistress, but you have to think about it. There will be many people who like him, and there will be many people who have such thoughts. I can get more from Jiang Hai, but, if one day, Jiang Hai gets tired of me, or if I want to leave him, I'm really afraid that I can't leave him. I'm afraid that my heart will be tied to him. So, if possible, this might be better. Everyone has a story, especially a woman like Feng Yunshan. Her story must be legendary. After all, in Jiang Hai's impression, she should be a good student. Why would she be forced to walk on this road that shouldn't belong to her? Jiang Hai didn't ask, and she didn't tell anyone. But the road under her feet was her own. Her sense of crisis made her unable to rely on anyone, even if she liked this person very much, just like Jiang Hai. She only wanted to maintain this relationship with him. Maybe this was good for everyone. Sister Chen, this. Aren't you tired? Looking at Feng Yunshan's appearance, AI Xiaoxi hesitated and said. Silly girl, everything depends on getting used to it. By the way, have you graduated from university? Perhaps it was AI Xiaoxi's heartache that touched Feng Yunshan's heart, but this made Feng Yunshan, who was always on guard, ask about it. No, not yet, but I've already applied for an internship. She was only 22 years old this year. According to the normal timeline, Xiaoxi should be in her 3rd year of university. Her internship was usually done in her 4th year. She must have her own reasons for doing so in advance. By the way, do you have a boyfriend? Hearing that AI Xiaoxi was willing to talk to her about this, Feng Yunshan asked curiously. There is one. I don't know if he's my boyfriend. We haven't done that before, but we are nominally his girlfriend in the university. Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, Xiaoxi couldn't help but blush as she whispered. Since you have a boyfriend, why would he let you come here to earn money? Hearing AI Xiaoxi's words, Feng Yunshan was a little speechless. Since you've chosen this path, I think I should make it clear to you that this path isn't easy. If you don't have a backer, you probably don't have one. After all, from the way that perverted manager treated you, it doesn't seem like you have one. Without a backer, it's going to be very tough in this industry. You're quite well off, but you won't be able to take on any car shows or runway shows in the beginning. The best opportunity would be SG, but there are too many people in SG, so it won't be easy to get you to stand out. Other than standing in SG, you'll have to walk out of some small exhibition halls. And the bosses of these small exhibition halls aren't easy to deal with. During dinner parties, they'll have to force you to drink, and they'll even openly throw money at you. If you can, really, it's best not to walk in this industry for too long. Hearing Feng Yunshan's words, Ai Xiaoxi couldn't help but bite her lips. She naturally knew the depth of the water. But she also had her own difficulties. Who asked this industry to make money quickly? This was also the most realistic. Okay, every family has their own difficulties. I won't say more. But you have to be careful, understand? Let's go to sleep. We still have to take photos tomorrow. Seeing Ai Xiaoxi biting her lips and not saying anything, Feng Yunshan didn't say anything. She patted her arm, took her quilt, and slowly fell asleep. Looking at Feng Yunshan's sleeping face, Ai Xiaoxi couldn't help but let out a long sigh. This sister Chen, although her face was cold, her heart was really warm. She sincerely hoped that this good person would have good karma. Looking at her phone and the name that she had blocked, Ai Xiaoxi gently bit her lower lip. In fact, her family didn't want her to enter this industry. After all, this industry's reputation wasn't very good. It was almost like working somewhere in the East. Even if nothing happened, people would think that something happened. Moreover, what was the probability of nothing happening in this industry? Especially her boyfriend, who objected the most fiercely. But in this world, love wasn't enough. She needed money. Ai Xiaoxi's family was in a rural area in the country. Her father originally went out to work and injured his leg at a construction site. Although he lost some money, he was fired just like that. Later, in order to treat his leg, he spent all the money he lost. Then, her mother got a tumor. Fortunately, it was a good tumor and not cancer. In the end, in order to save her mother, she had to undergo surgery and spent all the money left in the family. But this year, her younger brother, who was in high school, was diagnosed with leukemia and needed a bone marrow transplant. Their family's bone marrow could be transplanted and matched, but the surgery fee was 200,000. In addition to the later stage of recovery, it was 300,000. Her family borrowed all the money, and in the end, they even borrowed from loan sharks to gather 200,000 for the surgery. But the family was almost unable to survive because of the debt. She had to find a way to earn money. If she waited another year and looked for a job after graduation, how could she find a job that was so satisfying? Even if she could find a job, could she earn a few 100,000 a year? One had to know that the compound interest of loan sharks was very fierce. There was no other way. The only way to earn money was to sell herself. But she was not willing to go to a KTV or a place that sold herself directly. She still had a glimmer of hope in this cold world. At this time, one of her classmates recommended her to be a model. Although she had not received any training, with her beautiful face, tall figure, and voluptuous body, she was successfully selected. Then, she took a set of classic-style photos. There was a small response, but the money for the photos was only a few $1,000s. It was more than the money she earned from working, but it was still too early for her to repay the money. Maybe in the end, I can only take that step. I don't know how much I'm worth. Looking at Feng Yunshan's sleeping face, Ai Xiaoxi said with hesitation. Then, she put down her phone and fell asleep, but she didn't notice that not long after she fell asleep, Feng Yunshan, who she thought was asleep, opened her eyes. Looking at the sleeping Ai Xiaoxi, Feng Yunshan slowly sat up, then put on a coat and carefully left the room. Feng Yunshan, who left the room, did not go anywhere else. Instead, she went straight to Jiang Hai's room. As she knocked on the door, Jiang Hai also opened the door from the inside. When Jiang Hai saw Feng Yunshan, he was a little surprised. "Why aren't you sleeping?" He glanced at his watch. It was 10:00 in the evening. Jiang Hai was still watching TV. It was not time for him to go to bed, but he knew that Feng Yunshan and Ai Xiaoxi were very tired. It was so late yet they were still not sleeping. Why were they looking for him? What? We haven't seen each other for so long. Don't you miss me? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Feng Yunshan stepped in and rushed in through the door opened by Jiang Hai. Her hands naturally wrapped around Jiang Hai's neck. Ugh, hee. Looking at Feng Yunshan's charming eyes in front of him, how could Jiang Hai not know her purpose of coming here? But for this kind of thing, he has never taken the initiative. Just like the women's evaluation of him, he is a dull person. Idiot, put your hand here. Looking at Jiang Hai's somewhat bewildered look, Feng Yunshan glanced at him. Her right hand wrapped around Jiang Hai's neck. Her body was completely attached to Jiang Hai's body, and her other hand took Jiang Hai's hand and put it on her waist. The other hand, do whatever you want. After putting it on her waist, she also stuck to Jiang Hai's ear and said softly. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't hold back anymore. Before his other hand patted Feng Yunshan's butt, he deliberately made a gesture to Goldie and Xiao Bai. Although they were animals, it was better not to let them see this. Although Goldie and Xiao Bai despised Jiang Hai for having the opposite sex, they still obediently squeezed open the door and left. After watching them leave, Jiang Hai didn't care about that anymore. He directly picked up Feng Yunshan and threw her on his big bed amidst her screams. His big mouth also sealed hers immediately. In an instant, the battle between the two began. However, neither Jiang Hai nor Feng Yunshan noticed that after Goldie and the others left, the crack in the door had not yet closed. A ray of light, accompanied by a winding sound, gradually echoed inside the room. Of course, the soundproofing of Jiang Hai's villa was very good. If they didn't come out, they wouldn't be able to hear it. But there was still the premise that if they didn't come out, they probably wouldn't come out. However, at this time, Jiang Hai and Feng Yunshan didn't care so much. Since the last time, Jiang Hai hadn't eaten anything at all except for Xiao Yu and Xiao Yu. Of course, that day in Miami didn't count as eating anything. After all, nothing happened in the end. And since Feng Yunshan returned from Bingcheng, she hadn't done anything. Recently, the imperial court had been very strict. The relationship between a man and a woman was naturally of the utmost importance. Therefore, the person behind her was now accompanying his wife every day, afraid that others would catch him red-handed. Other than still receiving money, nothing else happened. The two of them had been holding back for almost a season. Now that they had bumped into each other, what else was there to say? You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.